Prologue. Betrayal is not the heart blow nor the dramatic upheaval of all that you know. Sometimes, it's a disappointment, a failing of hope, a confirmation of fears. Harry had been so angry at Dumbledore, at his secrets, at his refusal to confide in him as Harry devoted his loyalty to the professor. But there was no anger left in him now, no surprise. If there was shock, then it was in the disbelief of his own stupidity for trusting a person like Albus Dumbledore. Of course, there had been a bigger plan, a bigger picture in which Harry was an accessory and not the subject. He had never questioned his own assumption that Dumbledore wanted him alive. Now he saw that his lifespan had always been determined by how long it took to eliminate all the Horcruxes. Dumbledore had passed the job of destroying them to him, and obediently he had continued to chip away at the bonds tying not only Voldemort, but himself to life. How neat, how elegant, not to waste any more lives, but to give the dangerous task to the boy who had already been marked for slaughter, and whose death would not be a calamity, but another blow against Voldemort. And Dumbledore had known that Harry would not duck out, that he would keep going to the bitter end. In trusting him, he had given away all Dumbledore needed to know about him, learning him not as a friend but as an enemy, as Voldemort knew him. They both knew that Harry would not let anyone else die for him when he had the power to stop it. Images of Fred, Lupin, and Tonks lying dead in the Great Hall forced their way back into his mind's eye, and for a moment, Harry could hardly breathe. Yet death was impatient. Harry's dry lips brushed over the professor's last gift to him. The shades that appeared around beckoned him forward down this path that would end with them together. James was exactly the same height as Harry. He was wearing the clothes in which he had died in. His hair was untidy and ruffled, and his glasses were a little lopsided like Mr. Weasley's. Sirius was tall and handsome, and younger by far than Harry had seen him in life. He loped along beside him with an easy grace, his hands in his pockets, a wide grin on his face. Lily's smile was the widest of all. She pushed her long hair back as she drew closer to him, and her green eyes, so like his, searched his face hungrily, as though she would devour his presence. "You've been so brave," she said gently, with compassion and pride. Harry could not speak. His gaze never left hers. He thought that he might be content here, in this time that raced yet extended beyond reason, that he would like to look at her forever. The mother who had loved him and died for him. Died for him so he could die for others. "You are nearly there," said James. "Very close. We are so proud of you." "Does it hurt?" The childish question had fallen from Harry's heart before he could stem the bleeding of his fear. Did he truly have to do this? Dying? "Not at all," said Sirius. "Quicker and easier than falling asleep." Harry clung to those words even as his was startled into letting go of the hollow. His family vanishing as if they had never been. Not that it mattered much, he would, after all, be joining them soon. "Harry Potter," the Dark Lord crooned before spitting through his teeth like sparks spat from a fire. "The boy who lived. On the precipice of death, accepting of a fate Voldemort himself feared above all others. Harry did not feel brave, he felt foolish. He felt so very small as he closed his eyes against the light. Dying was neither easier nor quick. An eternity passed in agony as he was forced to relinquish who he was. Every dream, every hope, rendered from in an instant, in a lightning bolt sensation of being forced apart and then together. Harry could not help but fight, and in railing against his density, death spat him back out, taking with her something unnameable but pressure. Chapter 1: Easier than falling asleep. When Harry woke, he did so screaming, clutching his forehead as white-hot pain attempted to cleave his skull in two. He fell to the ground with a heavy thud, the tangle of blankets doing nothing to protect him. Death shouldn't hurt this much. That or Sirius was git for lying to him. When the pain subsided, he untangled himself from his covers and staggered to his feet. Something was wrong. No, scratch that, a lot of things were wrong. He was in Gryffindor Tower, and apparently he had just woken up. He found his glasses on the nightstand. The rest of the beds were empty. Was he shorter? Harry went to the bathroom, and the sight of himself in the mirror frightened him, and it wasn't because his scar was oozing blood. It was because the face in the mirror was years younger than it should have been. And he was short. Harry frowned and grabbed a towel, wetting it in the sink to wash the blood away. What kind of dream was this? Washing the wound hurt, but the cold water also soothed the aching in his forehead. "Harry?" A voice called from the hall. "In here," Harry shouted back. He kept his gaze on the mirror. He watched the scar close up and magically heal over into the faintest of white lines. The lightning bolt was still visible, but only if you were looking hard for it. This dream just kept getting curiouser and curiouser. "Mr. Potter?" It was Professor McGonagall. Harry left the bloody towel in the sink and went out to her. "You need to get dressed, Mr. Potter," she said when she saw him. Harry blinked at her and asked, "Why?" She gave him an unamused look. "Potter, the champions are congregating in the chamber of the hall after breakfast." Harry frowned. "Excuse me. The champions' families are invited to watch the final task, you know. This is simply a chance for you to greet them." What was this? Was he 14 again? This dream was rapidly becoming too realistic to be just a dream. Was this the afterlife? Some cosmic game so he would have to live through Cedric dying again? If that was the case, reliving Sirius's death would have been worse. Or maybe it would get worse. Or was this some sort of soul time travel? Was such a thing even possible? "Come, Mr. Potter, or you'll be late. You have already missed breakfast as it is." Harry threw on his robes and joined his head of house in the common room, mutely following behind her. As they walked, Harry admired the intact, non-ruble quality of the walls. They came into a room before the Great Hall, and it was like walking into his own memory in a pensive. Fleur's little sister, Gabrielle, was holding her mother's hand. She waved at Harry, who waved back. Then he saw Mrs. Weasley and Bill standing in front of the fireplace, beaming at him just as they had before. As if Fred hadn't died. As if there had never been a war. "Surprise!" Mrs. Weasley exclaimed. "Thought we'd come and watch you. Harry!" She bent down and kissed him on the cheek. "You all right?" asked Bill, grinning at Harry and shaking his hand. Charlie wanted to come, but he couldn't get time off. He said you were incredible against the Horntail. He was at a loss as to what to say. Cedric was alive. Was Fred too, or Mrs. Weasley wouldn't have been smiling? "It's great being back here," Bill was saying. "Haven't seen this place for 5 years. Is that picture of the Mad Knight still around? Sir Cadogan?" Harry nodded. "And the fat lady?" said Bill. "She was here in my time," said Mrs. Weasley. "She gave me such a telling off one night when I got back to the dormitory at 4 in the morning dash." "What were you doing out of your dormitory at 4 in the morning?" Bill asked. Mrs. Weasley grinned, her eyes twinkling. "Your father and I had been for a nighttime stroll," she said. "He got caught by Apollyon Pringle. He was the caretaker in those days. Your father's still got the marks." Amos Diggory waded in toward their group as Cedric held him back. Harry froze, fear chilling him, both because he had caused this man so much pain. "There you are you?" he said, looking Harry up and down. "Bet you're not feeling quite as full of yourself now Cedric's caught you up on points, are you?" Harry didn't answer, his tongue leaden by guilt. And not just of Cedric, but because of everyone who had died that Harry had been unable to save. "Ignore him," said Cedric in a low voice to Harry, frowning after his father. "He's been angry ever since Rita Skeeter's article about the Triwizard tournament. You know, when she made out you were the only Hogwarts champion. Didn't bother to correct her though, did he?" said Amos Diggory, loudly enough for Harry to hear. "Still, you'll show him," said. "Beaten him once before, haven't you?" "Rita Skeeter goes out of her way to cause trouble, Amos," Mrs. Weasley said angrily. "I would have thought you'd know that, working at the ministry." Mr. Diggory looked as though he was going to say something angry, but his wife laid a hand on his arm, and he merely shrugged and turned away. Harry was not upset to relive the morning of walking over the sunny grounds with Bill and Mrs. Weasley, showing them the Beauxbatons carriage and the Durmstrang ship. But it only made his anxiety worse as to what was to come. Right now, he felt as if he was walking through a dream, smiling, chatting, treating it like he was from the same timeline as this memory, that there was nothing bad about to happen. like he hadn't just died and woken up nearly 4 years in the past on the day that the Dark Lord came back to power. Like Albus Dumbledore hadn't set him up to die. "Mum, Bill," said Ron, looking stunned, as they joined the Gryffindor table. "What are you doing here?" "Come to watch Harry in the last task," said Mrs. Weasley brightly. "I must say, it makes a lovely change, not having to cook. How was your exam?" "Oh, okay," said Ron. Harry let the sounds of the familiar washing over him, picking at the food in front of him to hide the fact that he couldn't look around the room without remembering what had been or what would be. Cloth-covered bodies on the floor, injured moaning on cots. When the enchanted ceiling overhead began to fade from blue to a dusky purple, Dumbledore rose to his feet at the staff table, and silence fell. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 5 minutes' time, I will be asking you to make your way down to the Quidditch field for the third and final task of the Triwizard tournament. Will the champions please follow Mr. Bagman down to the stadium now?" Harry got up. The Gryffindors all along the table were applauding him. The Weasleys and Hermione all wished him good luck, and he headed off out of the Great Hall with Cedric, Fleur, and Victor. "Feeling all right, Harry?" Bagman asked as they went down the stone steps onto the grounds. "Confident." "I think we are all going to die," Harry said tonelessly. After all, this dream was fast approaching its nightmare-like quality. He hoped he would wake up soon. Bagman laughed, thinking Harry was joking. They walked onto the Quidditch field, which was now completely unrecognizable. A 20-foot-high hedge ran all the way around the edge of it. There was a gap right in front of them, the entrance to the vast maze. The passage beyond it looked dark and creepy. 5 minutes later, the stands had begun to fill. The air was full of excited voices and the rumbling of feet as the hundreds of students filed into their seats. The sky was a deep, clear blue now, and the first stars were starting to appear. Hagrid, Professor Moody, Professor McGonagall, and Professor Flitwick came walking into the stadium and approached Bagman and the champions. They were wearing large, red, luminous stars on their hats, all except Hagrid, who had his on the back of his moleskin vest. "We are going to be patrolling the outside of the maze," said Professor McGonagall to the champions. "If you get into difficulty and wish to be rescued, send red sparks into the air, and one of us will come and get you. Do you understand?" The champions nodded. Harry didn't nod, he just willed himself awake. It didn't work. "Off you go," then Bagman said brightly to the 4 patrollers. "Good luck, Harry," Hagrid whispered, and the 4 of them walked away in different directions to station themselves around the maze. Bagman now pointed his wand at his throat, muttered, "Sonorous," and his magically magnified voice echoed into the stands. "Ladies and gentlemen, the third and final task of the Triwizard tournament is about to begin. Let me remind you how the points currently stand. Tied in first place with 85 points each, Mr. Cedric Diggory and Mr. Harry Potter, both of Hogwarts School. The cheers and applause sent birds from the Forbidden Forest fluttering into the darkening sky. In second place, with 80 points, Mr. Victor Crumb, of Durmstrang Institute. More applause. And in third place, Miss Fleur Delacour, of Beauxbatons Academy. Harry could just make out Mrs. Weasley, Bill, Ron, and Hermione applauding Fleur politely, halfway up the stands. He waved up at them, and they waved back, beaming at him. "So, on my whistle, Harry and Cedric," said Bagman. 3, 2, 1 dash. And it all happened as it had before. Harry didn't talk as much, but in the end, it was just him and Cedric standing before the cup. "You should take it," Cedric said. Harry shrugged. "It's a trap." Cedric frowned. "What do you mean, it's a trap?" "Whoever takes that cup is going to die." Cedric glared at him. "That isn't funny, Potter." "The cup is a trap and Professor Moody is a fraud," Harry said. He sighed and reached out to the cup. "But I'm dead already, so what does it matter?" Cedric started, but he was too late to either stop Harry or to join him. As Harry felt the pull on his navel, he really hoped he was still dreaming. "Oh." Cedric shot red sparks up into the sky and started yelling for help. It took 10 minutes for help to arrive, but they were no more help than Cedric had been. False Moody received the Dementor's kiss and the real Moody was saved. But no one had the faintest idea as to where Harry Potter had gone. Oh. Harry landed with a thud on the ground. He hated portkeys. What had possessed him to grab the damned cup? He needed to stop treating this like a dream because clearly pain was a real factor. And apparently events could be altered. For instance, there was no spare. Harry threw a reducto into the gloom, incinerating a tombstone. Someone yelped and Riddle's voice yelled, "Subdue him, you fool!" Harry had already thrown up a shield charm which neatly reflected Wormtail's spell. Harry started throwing hexes and charms, one after another without a word and without relent. Screw dying, he wanted to live. He was never going to walk to his death again, greater good or no. Wormtail was a poor duelist. "Do not run," Voldemort instructed. But Wormtail was losing. 3 years, 3 painful, miserable years learning to fight to survive, barely scraping by in school thanks to the war, thanks to running away from Death Eaters and Aurors. Hell, his education had been put aside so he could rob banks. Harry was fresh from the battlefield, whereas Wormtail was lowlier than the worms that ate the dirt. With a pop, Wormtail operated away, leaving someone behind in the grass. Harry levitated a tombstone and repeatedly smashed it onto Nagini, who had come at him, fangs exposed. "You know," Harry said, wand pointed at the corpse of the last Horcrux, "I don't hate snakes. I just hate Voldemort's snakes. You are all creepy and twisted." Nagini didn't respond, as she was well and truly dead. Harry supposed he should go back to the cup, back to Hogwarts. He hesitated. No part of him wanted to go back to Hogwarts, to Dumbledore, to the students, or to the media. But he would have to because this wasn't a dream. Somehow dying had brought him back in time. 1995 was not a good year for him. Harry went to Riddle Sr.'s tomb and axioed all the bones. Morbid? Absolutely. But Voldemort had needed his father's bones to come back to his body. Pointing his wand at the bones, they shattered into dust and disappeared in a gust of wind. Harry walked out of the cemetery and followed a vaguely familiar path that led further away from the town and Riddle Manor. After an hour of walking, Harry found the gaunt shack, or the ruin of it, that Dumbledore had shown him in the pensive. He found the ring and transfigured a piece of wood into a porcelain ball just large enough to hold the ring. He scooped up the ring in the makeshift container, transfiguring it shut and pocketing the nullified poison. As long as he didn't touch it with his skin. He put the ring in his robe pocket, checking he had no holes in that pocket first. Harry had done a lot of thinking on his walk and did a lot more thinking on his way back to the graveyard. Number 1. If you are given a second chance to live, don't waste it. Number 2. Snape is more trustworthy than Dumbledore, and either McGonagall or Flitwick is more trustworthy than Snape. So he had best pick someone to who he was going to tell the whole story carefully and make sure that Dumbledore doesn't try to get control over Harry again. Number 3. Horcruxes. Taking into account his bleeding head pain this morning, he was going to wager that it had been the death of his Horcrux. The diary was finished, the ring was his, and Nagini was dead, which only left the cup still in Gringotts, the diadem back at Hogwarts, the locket still at Grimmauld Place, and of course Voldemort in his infant alien form. Number 4. Hedwig, Sirius, Fred, Cedric, Lupin, Nymphadora, and countless others were still alive, and Harry wanted them to stay that way. So who to trust? Harry asked himself as he stood before the cup lying inertly on the ground. It was dark out, but his eyes had long since adjusted to the moonlit night. Who do I trust? Not Dumbledore. It wasn't a voice in his head. It was his gut reaction to having trusted and loved a man who had set him up to die. So who do I trust who isn't with Albus Dumbledore? Harry asked out loud, because talking to himself was the least of his sanity concerns at the moment. Not Snape, not McGonagall, not even Sirius. Who then? But the thought had occurred to him already. Filius Flitwick. He wasn't a part of the Order, but he was a good man, a dueling champion, and head of Ravenclaw House. Harry could certainly use a little wisdom at this point in his life. Of course, this all could still be a dream. Merlin, let it all be a dream. Oh. Harry! Hermione was the first to get to him. She was sobbing. Mrs. Weasley was close behind. Harry told them over and over again that he was all right. What happened? What happened? It was all anyone could ask him once they realized he was, in fact, okay. Graveyard, Voldemort, Pettigrew, they both got away, Harry summarized. You are an idiot, Cedric yelled. You knew it was a trap. Why on earth did you grab it? Harry looked at Cedric dead on. Because if one of us had to die, I'd rather it be me. Quiet descended on them like a suffocating hand after that statement. McGonagall and Mrs. Weasley took charge then, and Harry made it back to the castle without an interception. He was unsurprised when he was directed immediately to the hospital wing to be checked over by Madame Pomfrey. He figured surviving the killing curse again only this morning qualified him as one who needed medical attention even though he felt fine. Oh. Poppy shooed away everyone, even the headmaster. Can I stay here until the end of the term? Harry asked. Poppy, who was more than accustomed to Harry as her tenant, was taken aback by this request. Harry Potter had never asked to stay longer in her care. She nodded mutely. There was less than a week anyhow, and she would be relieved to keep an eye on him. His next question was more unsettling than the first. Could you look at my scar, please? It was bleeding this morning. She did, and what she found scared her. Possession, she breathed. What was that, Madame Pomfrey? He asked her. This residue was of another magical life force, like a leech trying to eat its way into, not just your mind, but your soul. Is it gone? You don't sound surprised. Please, just tell me? He pleaded with heartbreakingly large eyes. Yes, it's gone, and whatever damage it caused, it should begin to heal naturally now. How did you get it off? She asked. I don't know what you mean, Harry tried. She did her best not to bite back with something scathing as her protective instincts wanted her to. Rather, she chided. Mr. Potter. The killing curse, Harry answered shortly. You aimed a killing curse at your scar? She asked, deeply concerned. No, Harry corrected. Peter Pettigrew did it. I woke up in the graveyard. She gaped at him. How was one supposed to respond to that? It hurts, he informed her. Dying hurts, and the killing curse hurts. It hurt when I was little and hurt the second time too. Poppy frowned and pulled a vial out of her apron. Dreamless sleep. Drink it and try not to worry about anything. She was scheduling herself for a miniature breakdown after she tore into Albus for letting him compete in this bloody tournament. I don't want to talk to Dumbledore, Harry blurted out. I will see what I can do, but rest, Mr. Potter. He did as he was told, for once, seemingly glad for the respite. Oh. Dumbledore maneuvered his way into seeing Harry. Harry glared at Pomfrey, who gave him an apologetic look before returning to her office. Harry gave the old wizard with his sparkling eyes one glance before gluing his eyes to his own, strangely, scarless hands. This man, this pillar in his life that had set him up to fall. Falling. It was Harry's last memory of this man alive, Albus falling off the tower because he made Snape kill him. Harry, please look at me, Albus said gently. Leave me alone, Harry muttered back. How did you know the cup was a trap? Because it was the last thing we did for tasks, and there had to be some goal, some reason, for putting my name in the goblet. Logical, Albus said. Logic? When had logic ever been a factor in Harry's life? I went to the graveyard, the headmaster ventured. It looked as if there had been a battle there. I found a rather dead snake. Wormtail got away with Voldemort, Harry said without raising his head. He's back. Harry shook his head. Only in the way that he's never really been gone. Albus sighed. That's good. Harry frowned. My boy, what's wrong? What's wrong is that you want me dead, Harry thought. But maybe that wasn't fair. Albus wanted Voldemort dead. Harry was just a means to an end. Harry, can you leave, please? He asked. I'm tired. Of course, if you told me everything important, I can go. Harry looked up then, making direct eye contact, his mental wards as solid as they had ever been. Maybe without a slice of another person's soul attached to his mind. He could be good at this mind magic. You know everything important, sir. It was the same tone Harry used with Snape, and Albus looked floored. Harry, you know I would never cause you harm, don't you? Harry's gaze grew angry and distant as he agreed, never directly, only by your inaction. I will let you get rest if you think of anything, tell me. Harry laid back, done with the conversation, and turned his back on the old man. Oh. Harry spent his last day at Hogwarts destroying Horcruxes. He went down to the Chamber of Secrets first with the ring and stabbed it right through the porcelain container. The ring screamed and the black smoke died. He picked up the stone and pitched it into the Slytherin statue's maw where the snake had crawled out from. Harry wrapped the fong in a scrap of leather and took his broom back up the passage that he had cleared. Harry went right to the room of requirement, found and destroyed the diadem. Harry looked at the pieces of the crown and wrapped them up in a satchel. How was he supposed to get into Gringotts again? Bellatrix Lestrange was still in prison, so the first insane way they had done it wouldn't work. He looked around the room for inspiration, and it was the room itself that gave him an idea. Dobby, Harry called. Dobby appeared with his typical greeting. Dobby, Harry started. Do you know how to break into Gringotts? The elf blinked. What does Harry Potter need? I need the Hufflepuff cup from Bellatrix Lestrange's vault. Dobby shuddered but snapped his fingers and the cup appeared in front of them, the sound of metal ringing as it hit the ground. Harry gaped. It can't be that easy. If Harry Potter, sir, had asked Dobby to get him money from any vault but his own, Dobby couldn't have done it. But this is a Hogwarts object and belongs to the school. As Dobby spoke, Harry pulled the basilisk fong and struck the cup. It screamed and the cup was left with a huge dent and black mark on it, but it was soulless. As any honest and respectable cup ought to be. Harry Potter, sir, that was dark magic, the house elf informed him. Yep, and there is one more. Where, sir? Dobby asked, ready for the challenge. Grimmauld Place, Slytherin's locket, Harry said. Dobby snapped his fingers once more, but the locket did not appear alone. Another elf, this one snarling with a blind rage, came attached to the locket. Wait, creature, Harry called. Creature, wait. We are trying to destroy it as Master Regulus asked you to. Creature paused in trying to strangle Dobby and slowly turned to Harry. What do you know about Master Regulus? Sirius Black is my godfather, and that locket needs to be opened by a parselmouth and destroyed with something that can destroy the darkest of magic. Creature let go of Dobby, who coughed and gave the other elf a dark look. Harry motioned for the elf to lay the locket on the floor, which Creature did reluctantly. Open, Harry hissed. Harry, who was feeling a tad stab happy, stabbed at the moment the gears sprung open. More screaming black smoke and it was over. The dairy, the snake, the ring, the diadem, the cup, the locket, and himself were all taken care of. Harry picked up the locket that was mostly undamaged and told it to close. He handed it to Creature. Thank you, Creature. The dirty elf looked at him in awe. You're welcome, Master Potter, before popping away. Do you need anything else, Harry Potter, sir? Dobby asked. No, Dobby, thank you. Dobby needs to go back to preparing the feast, but you can call Dobby whenever you need him. Harry nodded and Dobby popped out as well. Harry found his way to Flitwick's office next. He hesitated only briefly before knocking on the doorframe. Come in, said the man's merry voice before he looked up and smiled. Oh, Mr. Potter, come right in. Harry approached his desk, shutting the door behind him. Harry was pleased to see that there were no portraits in Flitwick's office. What can I do for you, Mr. Potter? I hope this isn't about homework or tests. You have been excused from such things for the year. One might think you've learned quite enough this year about magic. Professor, Harry started. I need to talk to someone who isn't a member of the Order of the Phoenix, someone who I can maybe trust. Flitwick sat back in his chair. You mean Dumbledore's order? Yes. Flitwick frowned. Why wouldn't you go to Dumbledore himself? What to say to that? Harry ended up just blurting out, I don't want to be a martyr. I don't want there to be another war, but if there is, I want to fight, not just be a cog in a larger plan. Flitwick blinked. Explain. And Harry did. starting with the prophecy and Snape's part, Quirrell, the Chamber of Secrets, Sirius, Wormtail, the Goblet of Fire, Voldemort coming back, Umbridge, the Veil, the Horcruxes, Dumbledore's death, the school being overrun by Death Eaters, the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry's death, and Harry waking up the day of the final task and him rehunting the Horcruxes. Harry must have talked for hours, and when he was done, Flitwick brewed a fresh pot of tea. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes as Harry drank deeply from the glass of water that had been refilling itself through his confession. Albus is... I can't believe this, Flitwick said finally. What am I supposed to do? Harry asked. What are you supposed to do? Flitwick repeated, outrage. Nothing, you shouldn't have been responsible for any of this. It is us, the adults, who should have to do something. I am 17, Harry interrupted. Flitwick sighed. Perhaps, but you are in the body of your 14-year-old self. A war is coming. I can't sit back and do nothing. I will not wait and let what happened the first time around happen again. I will not let that happen either. I will be keeping an eye on Mr. Malfoy. Narcissa was one of my favorite students along with your mother. I will not allow either of you to come to ruin. And Severus is too close to this. But what do I do? Harry asked again. You destroyed all the Horcruxes? Harry brought out the remains of Ravenclaw's diadem and the cup. All of them. May I? Flitwick asked, reaching out for it. I am not sure if it is safe to touch, but I know it doesn't have a Horcrux in it anymore. But you can keep it. Flitwick nodded and pulled open a drawer and slipped the cup and the diadem into it by pulling on the cloth it was resting on. I will think on what to tell Minerva, Pomona, and Poppy when the time is right, but let me ask you this, Harry, what more can be done at this moment? You've destroyed all that anchors him to this world, and you have destroyed the remains of Riddle's father. I don't know, Harry said. But we have to do something. We have to find Wormtail and Voldemort. Flitwick sighed. And with a tracker on your wand and the prohibition of underage magic, how do you plan to start? Live in the woods for the rest of your life? On the run? Do you even know where to start looking for him? Harry looked out the window. I can't. It can't all be for nothing. I can't let them all die again. You prevented the Dark Lord from coming back into his full power. You destroyed the Horcruxes in 1 week. That is more than anyone else could have done. And you wouldn't have been able to do that if you hadn't already lived it. So this is what we are going to do. You are going back to the Dursleys for 1 more summer. You are going to study. You are going to come back to school and work for your own future for whatever it is you want to do. And if Voldemort ever gets close to you again, he'll be in for a fight. Flitwick took a breath. I am going to reach out to my contacts in the ministry. You and I are going to exchange letters over the summer, so I know that you are safe and mentally dealing with all that has happened. I am going to do everything I can to help you and stop him. But for now you want me to go home and be a good little boy, Harry said, too tired to put force behind the words. Do you want to tell everyone you time traveled? Because that comes with its own set of problems. No, Harry said shortly, but I can tell my friends, right? Of course, for they will believe you. However, this is the sort of story that even if you tell it, few would want to believe it. You can't tell Dumbledore, Harry ordered, but it came out as a sort of question. Flitwick's nostrils flared. No, I don't believe I will be telling Albus much of anything. His intentions were good, his actions were and are inexcusable. Harry nodded and stood. Thanks for listening to me, Professor Flitwick. It was my honor, Mr. Potter. Feel free to contact me about anything, even if it seems insignificant or you need someone to talk to about personal matters. You can come to me with anything. Thank you, Harry said again before leaving, shutting the door softly behind him, hardly believing that an adult had listened to him without interpretation or censure. Harry had no desire to leave Hogwarts. Even with the nightmares dogging his steps, he wanted to stay. He trudged up the steps to Gryffindor Tower. Harry! Harry looked up toward the voice. Luna? He asked. Had they even met yet? He couldn't remember. Merlin, but he was tired. He had slept all week, and yet he was still weary. Yes, I'm Luna. You look older, she told him. She stood on the steps above him, her white hair glowing, her luggage held in front of her brightly colored skirts. I feel ancient, Harry attempted to joke, but his voice was dull and his humor fell short. "Feel younger soon," she said with a sweet smile before skipping past him, the steps not causing her any trouble at all. Harry was smiling the faintest bit as he reached his dorm. Everyone was gone. He found his luggage packed at the foot of his bed. Ron or Hermione must have packed for him. He continued to move slowly as he made his way to Hogsmeade. What did it matter if the train left without him? He had been worse off than that before. Harry found Ron and Hermione on the train. Having already told them the graveyard story over the last week, he didn't have much to say. Harry felt bad about not telling them about the time travel, but he wasn't ready to explain himself to his friends. Telling Flitwick had been easy in some ways because he didn't know the professor well enough to fear his judgment. Flitwick had taken it all in stride. He did not think Hermione would have such a restrained response. Harry drifted to sleep on the Hogwarts Express. He couldn't help thinking that falling asleep was far easier than walking to one's death, far easier than dying. Chapter 2: Summer Letters. The most remarkable part of Harry's summer was the absence of pain in his scar. Unremarkably, the nightmares remained, despite the lack of visions of Voldemort and the Department of Mysteries. Images plagued him from the war. He woke most nights stifling screams, hiding in the back of his closet, having no memory of how he got there. Being stuck at the Dursleys did not help. Harry cooked, cleaned, and studied. Hedwig, his beautiful, wonderful, best friend ever, was his constant company except when Harry sent her to the bookstore. Harry's library was sure to make even Hermione envious now. Harry wrote to Professor McGonagall expressing his desire to drop divination. He had seen more of the future than he had ever desired. She sent an adamant response back with Hedwig, wishing him well and saying that he would have to pick another subject. Depending on the subject, he might have to take a class with younger classmates. She had attached a list of classes. Harry had no idea what he should pick, and it was that choice which prompted Harry to send his first letter to Professor Flitwick. Oh. Dear Professor Flitwick, thank you for listening to me at the end of term. I hope all is well with you. I told Professor McGonagall about switching out of divinations. She said that I needed to pick another topic. I am staying with care of magical creatures, but I don't know what else would be worth it. Any suggestions as to what would be useful? I don't have much of a preference, so whatever you think is best, I'll take. Can you suggest a good reading selection to catch up in that class too, please? Warmest regards, Harry Potter. Oh. A few days later, Hedwig returned with another, larger owl, carrying a small stack of books between them. Oh. Dear Mr. Potter, I am delighted to hear from you. Arithmancy is probably your best bet for a practical class. Combined with charms, you can begin to learn about ward seeing as you have such a strong inclination for defense against the dark arts. I have sent some reading material that should catch you up on the material of the first few years. Regrettably, as Minerva indicated, you will likely still be placed in a class with the fourth years. All the same, I would confirm with her. The study of ancient runes should be your next choice, though in that subject's core there is an element of divinations. Confirm with Minerva that arithmancy can fit into your schedule and you can begin some of the essay prompts. A short response should be sufficient for each as long as you understand the material. It was one of my best classes when I was your age. Feel free to send me any questions you may have. Also, if you find yourself bored, we can always exchange letters discussing charms and data. Otherwise, how are you doing? Do you have any friends back home you've been able to spend time with? Is your family aware of what has been happening to you? Are you taking care of yourself? If you need anything, I will be there for you. All the very best. Phileas. Oh. Harry gave the second owl, who was a Hogwarts owl, a letter for McGonagall to confirm arithmancy as his choice. Harry found himself rereading Flitwick's letter dozens of times over. Aside from Hermione and the rare letter from Ron, no one had ever sent him such a personal letter. This summer, no one was sending him letters, aside from the one cryptic letter from Sirius who told him to keep his head down this summer. Harry waited 3 days before replying to Flitwick. In those 3 days, Harry had read 2 out of the 3 books for practical applications of arithmancy, and he had started on the second textbook. The ward stuff was a lot more interesting than the basics, but the basics were kind of fun too. It was magical math formula puzzles. Like potions, Harry didn't necessarily need a wand. He just needed to be magical. Oh. Dear Professor Flitwick, thank you. I really liked the books you sent me, and Professor McGonagall confirmed that I have room and the time to take arithmancy with the fourth-year class. As for your questions, I do not have friends here, and the Dursleys do not like to talk about magic or anything related to it, so I told them nothing. The nightmares have been pretty bad, but my scar does not hurt. I have been eating enough. Oh. This was a falsehood. But for once it wasn't the Dursleys' fault, because he wasn't truly hungry and he feared what he could keep down if he did eat proper meals. Oh. I have been exercising a little, but mostly I have been reading and completing my summer homework. I plan to force Professor Snape to give me an outstanding or at least an exceeds expectation, seeing as I am 2 years ahead. Could you give me harder essays for your class when I get back to school? I received an E on my OWLs for your class. I would like to keep moving forward as I never got to do my 7th year. Also, do you know if Dolores Umbridge will be teaching? I was thinking of starting up a Dada club, and I was wondering if you or McGonagall could supervise it. Thank you for your time. All the best. Harry. Oh. It was the longest letter Harry could ever remember sending someone. The most he had opened up to anyone outside of Ron and Hermione on paper. Reading it over, only the line about his OWLs and being 2 years ahead seemed odd. If anyone else read this, they would probably think he was crazy. Which was alright, Harry had been called worse. Writing that letter gave Harry an idea. Harry sent Sirius a letter. Oh. Hi Snuffles. Hope you are doing well and eating enough. I know things as they are, we can't say much through letters, but I wanted to ask you about defense against the dark arts and transfiguration. What do you think, aside from the obvious moon consideration, is the most useful transfiguration spells? Is it just natural talent that my dad had for the subject, or did he study differently than other people? And for dueling, what do you think is most important? Love, Harry. Oh. It was a sedate letter, an academic letter, and Sirius's response was the same, though with little hints about anecdotes that he would tell Harry in person. Harry began loving school in a way he had never before. He exchanged a near-endless chain of letters with Sirius and Flitwick about transfiguration, Dada, charms, and arithmancy. Always before, Harry had written people to talk about Voldemort, or with Ron letters about Quidditch. But Harry wasn't 15, he was 18 and had sort of survived a war. Talking to Sirius, not about the straight theory of transfiguration but the practical uses, theoretical topics, and spells that he read about in the book, was a lot of fun. Maybe Harry should have been exchanging letters with Remus, but as much as Harry loved his old professor, Sirius seemed to care more. Besides, for the more technical stuff he could send a letter to Flitwick. Harry had even gone so far as to send McGonagall a few questions. Harry had always dumbed himself down, ever since Puntiuna had begun starving him for getting better grades than Dudley, and then to remain friends with Ron, who preferred to do anything but homework. But Quidditch wasn't enough to keep his mind busy, trapped as he was in Surrey. Harry almost started a half a dozen letters to Hermione, who surely would have loved Harry's new interest in his academics, but Hermione was sharp, and she would know something major had changed in him if he did so. Sirius didn't really know Harry well enough for his interest in school to be a red flag. Hiding that he was 2 years ahead in material from Hermione, however, was going to be a problem. Of course, he could always confide everything to Ron and Hermione, and he wouldn't have to hide anything. Yet there still remained the issue of not being able to explain it properly. If he told Sirius one day, his godfather would understand, having fought in a war himself. Flitwick had been around for 2 wizarding wars. Ron hadn't lost a single family member, nor had Hermione erased her parents' memory of her. They weren't Harry's 2 best friends who had been tortured, gone into hiding, broke into Gringotts, and countless other life-alternating, deadly deeds with Harry yet. How could he confide in them? What if it hurt them to know the future? What if they started having nightmares like Harry? And perhaps, worst of all, what if he told them and they never understood him like they had before? Oh. Harry was grateful he didn't forget the date of the Dementor attack. The court case against him may have helped his memory in that. Harry walked to the park, his wand prepared, and just like last time, he found Dudley and his friends. Harry was able to get the upper hand on teasing this round. Dudley didn't have the Cedric comeback as seldom as Harry had grown accustomed to muffling his screams on the rare occasion. He slept deeply enough not to wake up battle-ready. "Why do you have your stick out still?" Dudley asked, frowning down at Harry. Harry still hated being short. 2 years from now he would not be the tallest guy around, but for right now, he was still stunted for his age. "Something is bound to attack me sometime," Harry answered casually. "Only this time I'll be ready," Harry thought. As if on cue, the street became colder, the streetlights dimmer, and all the happiness in the world began to fade away, as if the saturation of the landscape was being drained by some mighty hand. The Dementors came gliding like shadows on the wind. Wordlessly, Harry summoned his Patronus, his stag charging the Dementors before they got close enough to do real damage. Harry pushed Dudley. "Run, Duty-de-kins." They made it back to the house intact. "What was that?" Dudley asked between panting breaths as Harry leaned back against the closed door. "Dementors, jail guards that can suck your soul out of your body." Dudley gaped at Harry. "Why go to that freak school if you have to deal with stuff like that?" "Because it is better than living here," Harry answered honestly. "I have people who actually care about in my world." Dudley didn't have a comeback for that. "I feel awful," he said instead, referring not to Harry's troubles but to the depression the Dementors left behind them. "Chocolate, we need chocolate." Dudley, not one to question the need for sweets, motioned for Harry to stay by the door as he went into the living room to ask Aunt Petunia for a chocolate bar. He came back and Harry was surprised to receive a small slice. "Thanks," Harry said, nibbling on the bit of chocolate. "Damned owls," Uncle Vernon shouted. Harry sighed and stepped into the living room to go through the chorus of the Ministry's talking letters. "Ha ha," Uncle Vernon mocked with a self-superior air. "You've been expelled." "Not yet," Harry said as the second and third owl came. "What's happening?" Aunt Petunia asked. "Harry saved me," Dudley volunteered. "Saved you from what, son?" Uncle Vernon asked, caught between concern for Dudley and the unreasonable rage against anything that threatened his son. It wasn't one of Vernon's redeeming qualities, per se, but it did make him more relatable. Harry liked to think that if his parents had lived, Vernon would have received a lot more than a pig's tail. "A Dementor," Harry said without explanation. Aunt Petunia shrieked and half fainted onto the couch. "What?" Uncle Vernon roared. "Well, it was 2 Dementors, actually, and I used a charm to fend them off." "We should have never taken you in," Uncle Vernon yelled, "putting our son in danger. Why, I ought to ring your—" "If I wasn't around then, the Dark Lord would be, and if he were around then, the Dementors would be one of the numerous dangers that you would have no defense from," Harry said evenly. Uncle Vernon was easier to deal with when they weren't both angry. And last time Dudley had thrown up and been shaking, not chowing down on a chocolate bar. "I have a gun." "And what good is a gun against something you can't even see?" Harry questioned. "So we should be grateful?" Uncle Vernon demanded. "As long as you don't starve me or hit me or curse my parents' memory, I don't really care what you are. And I would never ask for your gratitude any more than I would give you mine," Harry said. "We housed you," Vernon roared. Harry kept his wand out, but he crossed his arms as he said, "You both are sadistic, small-minded, jealous, and horrible people who used me for all your issues and made me into a servant you paid with literal table scraps. You don't care a whit about me, but one day you're going to care when Dudley grows a heart and can't stand to be around people who never encouraged him to be better, never gave him a reason to try. The real world isn't going to coddle him." Vernon had turned purple during Harry's tirade. "Why, you little ungrateful wretch!" Harry wasn't expecting the backhand. Typically, Vernon was more careful about the damage he did. Slap to the back of the head, going at his back below the collar, never anything that would cause a black eye and get the neighbors gossiping. Harry hadn't been eating enough, his reflexes were slow, and he fell back against the door with a thud. Vernon punched him in the gut and he dropped, losing his grip on his wand. The evil in Vernon's eyes was just as made and horrific as Voldemort's. The Death Eaters had no right to do what they did, but that didn't mean Vernon wasn't the type of man to don a white cloak and hood and join a mob. He raised a foot, whether to kick Harry or snap his wand. He would never know because Dudley pulled him back. "Dad, don't." "All right." Dudley had seen Harry get slapped around, been encouraged to hurt him, and beat him up with his own gang. But Vernon was nearly 3 times his size, and the man was always careful to keep the probably illegal stuff for when Dudley had gone to bed. It was nice that his cousin had limits. "Harry, go," Dudley said, standing between him and his father. Harry didn't need telling twice, as he scooped up his wand and practically climbed the stairs, his head still ringing. Harry wrote Flitwick and Sirius a letter, followed by one to Amelia Bones, explaining his side of the story. "Oh, dear Flitwick. It happened like before, minus 1 howler. All the best. Harry. Oh, dear Snuffles. I'll be good and I promise to stay inside. Dudley gave me chocolate. Guess he's not all bad after all. Love. Harry. Oh, dear Madam Bones. Can I sue the government for sending 2 Dementors after me and my cousin? I don't really want money or anything except for it not to happen again and being able to keep my wand so I can keep saving my own life. Thanks for your time. Warm regards, Harry Potter." Oh. Flitwick's response was clipped and he promised to be at the hearing with Albus, along with McGonagall. Sirius sent back "I love ya, kid," and Madam Bones wrote back a rather informal letter. "Oh. Dear Mr. Potter, I will not allow anyone in the ministry to break your wand. I will be digging into who sent the Dementors to Muggle Surrey. I only regret to say that you must still attend the hearing as the minister himself requested it. As stupid as the formalities are, they must be practiced. However, I implore you not to worry. As the head of Department of Law Enforcement, I can promise you will keep your wand and be able to attend Hogwarts for your 5th year. Try not to use any more magic, but do not hesitate to keep yourself safe if the need arises. Yours sincerely, Amelia Bones. P.S. Susan says hi." Oh. Harry smiled at the letter and wrote back, "Dear Madam Bones, thank you so much. Warm regards, Harry. P.S. Hi Susan, smiley face." Oh. When the order came to pick him out at his home, he was packed, his room clean, and Hedwig's empty cage was bird poop free. Harry had told her to go ahead to Sirius's place after delivering a message to Madam Bones. Harry chatted with Tonks happily and Remus gave Harry a quick hug. "Thanks, Harry," Remus said. "Thanks for what?" Harry asked as he rolled on his broom closer toward the older wizard. It was good to be flying again. Harry was not going to get kicked off the team this year. Even if he had to play nice with Umbridge, he would. Well, at least he wouldn't pick a fight with her. "Your letters to Sirius, he waits for them every day, you know. He spends hours writing and perfecting his responses. I think you're the only thing keeping him sane." Harry smiled. He knew exactly what Sirius was going through, and he was glad to hear that the letters had meant as much to his godfather as they had to him. "They've been the only thing keeping me sane too. A real interest in your studies, not just defense, huh? Sirius came to me for a couple of the questions you asked him," Remus said with a grin. Harry shrugged. "What else was I supposed to do this summer, mope?" Remus frowned, opening his mouth to say something, but Tonks swept down and challenged Harry to race, which Harry eagerly agreed to. By the time Moody let them land, they were freezing, but it had been completely worth it to taste the sky again. Oh. Grimmauld Place was almost unrecognizable. It was, dare Harry even think it clean. Mrs. Weasley greeted them and Harry started to go around her to go see Sirius. Writing to him had been great, but Harry couldn't shake the feeling he was exchanging letters with a dead man. Until Harry saw Sirius for himself. In the flesh, he couldn't really believe his godfather was alive. His godfather who, like his parents, had died for him. Only Sirius had died because of Harry's mistakes. "No, Harry," Mrs. Weasley, holding him by the shoulder. "There's an order dash." Harry shrugged her off, his temper rising. "Like any of you have anything important to say. You talk and you talk, but your actions are always too late to ever do anyone any good." Momentarily stunned by Harry's hostility, he was able to get past her. There was a mixed reaction to Harry's barging in. Several people looked annoyed or, in Snape's case, actively scowling. Several more looked indifferent, as Harry had said. They didn't truly have that much to discuss, while a handful smiled at him. Harry wondered why the order had even been gathered. Voldemort had yet to return to power, but then maybe it was a good thing the order was getting a head start. Harry saw McGonagall, who gave him a warm, if small, smile. Harry ignored the headmaster before the headmaster had the chance to avert his eyes from Harry's. Sirius stood, his smile radiant. Harry hugged him tightly. Sirius chuckled when Harry nearly squeezed the life out of him and returned the hug just as fiercely. "How touching," Snape sneered. "But some of us have more important things to do with our time." Harry let go of Sirius. Before his godfather could start a fight, Harry said in a sincere voice with a huge smile toward the dour wizard, "Sorry, Professor. I'll leave." Harry grinned at Sirius's shocked expression as he left the room. Harry ran up the steps. The house elf heads were still in the hall, but it was still remarkably dust-free compared to his first visit here. Hermione jumped him as soon as he reached the bedroom they were staying in. Harry hugged her back. "Oh, Harry, you must be so angry at us," she started. "Ron, Harry's here." Harry smiled at his two best friends, internally laughing at the thought of these younger versions snogging. "I'm not mad, Hermione." "Hey, Harry," Ron greeted, grinning. "How have you been?" Harry asked them both. "Fine," Hermione said warily. She waited, but when he didn't blow up at her or demand answers, she asked, Are you not mad at us?" "Nope, not mad," Harry agreed. "Ron, do you want to kick my butt at a game of wizarding chess?" Ron's face lit up like it was Christmas. "Yeah, sure, mate." Hermione frowned at them. Harry, you seem calm about the whole Dementor attack." "I sent Hedwig to Madame Bones," Harry said. Hedwig flew down from her perch in the room to cuddle on Harry's shoulder, and she said there was nothing to worry about. "Fudge is out to get me is all." Ron and Hermione exchanged a worried glance. "The head of magical law enforcement hold you back?" "Of course she did," he said. "Aside from being Harry Potter, Dementor attacks in a Muggle suburb is a big enough deal for her to be personally involved in." "Mate," Ron started slowly, "you sure you're feeling all right?" "Honestly," Harry assured them, "I'm fine." "Really?" Hermione asked. "Because at the end of last year you didn't talk to us at all, and we were prepared for you to be angry, and now you're—" "I've been exchanging letters with Sirius almost every other day all summer," Harry said. "I know no one was abandoning me." Fred and George apparat into the room. "Harry," they said in unison. "Hi, Gred, hi, Forge," Harry said. They laughed, slinging an arm around his shoulders as they held up extendable ears. "You want to listen in to the order meeting?" Harry eyed the ears. Yeah, he would like to know, but Mrs. Weasley called them down for supper. Fred and George sighed. Fred said, "Guess we are too late this time." George pocketed the ears. "We had better hide these before Mum trashes these too." "Is everything going according to plan then?" Harry asked as they headed down the steps. Harry had put the Triwizard rewards in Fred's pocket with a note. They smiled at him. George whispered, "Yeah, we got a space in Diagon Alley." "What are you whispering about now?" Hermione asked, giving the twins a suspicious look. They only smirked at Hermione before disapparating. Mrs. Weasley yelled at them when they reappeared downstairs. Harry got to Sirius's side in record time. Snape turned his chin up at the happy pair only to almost trip at the sight of Creature, who appeared in front of him. The elf bowed low. "Creature welcomes Master Potter." Sirius raised his eyebrows. "You two have met?" "Dobby introduced us," Harry supplied. "I thought the elf was yours, Sirius?" Snape inquired. "I thought so too," Sirius said. "But Harry can have him. He seems reasonably civil with him." Creature deepened his bow, so that his large ears brushed the floor. Creature would be honored to serve Master Potter. "Okay," Sirius agreed. A power washed through the room as Creature's loyalties shifted. "Idiot," Snape hissed. "Now we will have to re-dash." "Creature, I forbid you from sharing anything you know, have learned, or have heard, as well as will hear and learn with anyone by either magical or mundane means outside the order without my explicit permission," Harry commanded. Snape's lips tightened, but he gave one short nod and left. Sirius elbowed Harry. "That's better than the command Albus came up with." Harry grinned. Creature will be cleaning. Master can call if he needs creature, the elf said before popping away. Why does he like you? Ron asked. Harry shrugged. I must remind him of someone. Sirius frowned at Harry. I suppose you are sort of like my little brother, even maybe a more than you are like James, though Reggie got messed up with Death Eaters. I'm sorry, Sirius, Harry said, and he wanted to tell him how Regulus had died fighting against Voldemort, but right now wasn't the time or place for that talk. Sirius shook himself like a dog shaking off water, and Harry saw that their letters had helped him recover more of himself. He looked healthier and more cheerful than he had in their original timeline. It was a ray of hope in what Harry was sure would be a difficult year. Even knowing the future, Harry's luck was not to be trusted. Chapter 3: Slipping Through the Cracks. Nearly time for bed, I think, said Mrs. Weasley with a yawn. Not just yet, Molly, said Sirius, pushing away his empty plate and turning to look at Harry. You know, I'm surprised at you. I thought the first thing you'd do when you got here would be to start asking questions about Voldemort. The atmosphere in the room changed with the rapidity Harry associated with the arrival of Dementors. Where seconds before it had been sleepily relaxed, it was now alert, even tense. A frisson had gone around the table at the mention of Voldemort's name. Lupin, who had been about to take a sip of wine, lowered his goblet slowly, looking wary. Has he gotten back his full power yet? Harry asked immediately. No, Sirius, Mrs. Weasley snapped. They're too young. She was sitting bolt upright in her chair, her fists clenched on its arms, every trace of drowsiness gone. Since when did someone have to be in the Order of the Phoenix to ask questions? Asked Sirius. Harry's been trapped in that muggle house for over 2 months. He's got the right to know what's been happened. Hang on, interrupted George loudly. How come Harry gets his questions answered? Said Fred angrily. We've been trying to get stuff out of you for a month and you haven't told us a single stinking thing, said George. You're too young, you're not in the Order, said Fred, in a high-pitched voice that sounded uncannily like his mother's. Harry's not even of age. Well, Harry thought, as far as they knew, he wasn't. It's not my fault you haven't been told what the Order's doing, said Sirius calmly. That's your parents' decision. Harry, on the other hand, It's not down to you to decide what's good for Harry, said Mrs. Weasley sharply. The expression on her normally kind face looked dangerous. You haven't forgotten what Dumbledore said, I suppose? Which is when Harry snapped. Just tell me if he has regained his power or not, I can guess the rest. He hasn't regained power, but the rumors of him coming back, of him being the one to kidnap you, have shifted things, Sirius said. Haven't you been reading the papers, Harry? Hermione asked. No. Well, they've been saying really awful things. Rita Skeeter heard you tell Dumbledore Graveyard, Voldemort, Pettigrew, they both got away. And now everyone thinks, well, that you are You're mad, Ron supplied. Like a lunatic. Well, not everyone thinks so, but according to the papers, Hermione added. But some of the Death Eaters and Voldemort's lesser followers have begun to move. And so have we, that is the Order and Dumbledore. Even if he isn't at full strength yet, he still has resources, beyond Wormtail. But what can he do? Hermione asked. What does he want if he isn't just trying to come back to life? He's after something, Sirius said. Like a weapon, something he didn't have last time. Harry's couldn't keep the look of despair off his face. It is in the Department of Mysteries, and you shouldn't bother with it. The damage has already been done. Sirius sat forward, surprise and worry warring on his face. How can you possibly know what it is? The rest of the room was hushed. Even Mrs. Weasley, who had been trying to shoo her children out of the room, paused looking at Harry. It's nothing. That's why my parents were murdered. But it changes nothing now. You should just let him have it. Voldemort already wants me dead. So it's nothing, completely meaningless, Harry said as he stared at Sirius and remembered this beloved man falling into the veil. Sirius had died for him, died so Harry could hunt Horcruxes and martyr himself later on. Sirius reached out a hand and squeezed his shoulder in quiet comfort. Harry sucked in a breath, realizing that at some point he must have stopped breathing. It was too much. It was everything he wanted, a chance at a family, to have Sirius back, but it was too much. He turned his attention back to Mrs. Weasley. Sirius has every right. She blinked at him. What, Harry dear? Sirius has every right to make choices on my behalf. He's my godfather. She scoffed. Hardly. He can't take care of himself, much less a child. It was an effort not to bare his teeth. Yet he's done more for me than the Dursleys ever had, and that was Dumbledore's stupid choice. Mrs. Weasley drew herself up. You were safe. Harry pictured Vernon's hands around his throat, Aunt Petunia refusing him a cup of water after making him landscape in the full summer sun, and what Uncle Vernon did to him when the door was closed, when he was told to keep quiet as the monster lashed his back until he bled. It was a miracle he had survived his childhood, and Sirius's very existence had ensured Harry's safety. Sometimes, having a mass murderer as your magical dogfather was a boon. Mrs. Weasley was still ranting at him, and he had had enough. Mrs. Weasley, Ginny got possessed by Voldemort in her first year. Ron took on a whole nest of spiders, and Hermione survived looking into the eye of the basilisk. I killed a professor my first year, a basilisk my second year, fended off a horde of Dementors my third, and won the Triwizard tournament that was rigged by a Death Eater last semester. But I'm sorry, we're all too young to hear about rumors of the Dark Lord returning. Did I get that right? Mrs. Weasley's jaw dropped as the room fell perfectly quiet. Only for Ginny to break it with a, I told you so. Nothing you say can possibly be worse than being possessed. Mrs. Weasley shuddered but shook her head. No, I know you lot. The more you know, the more trouble you will get into. Which was entirely untrue. It was secrets that had gotten Harry into trouble, the mystery that Dumbledore perfectly laid out for him to follow. As naive as a lamb to slaughter. Harry remembered the walk through the forest, the heavy anticipation of the Death Eaters eager for his defeat and humiliation. Adults who liked nothing more than to hurt and kill children. Harry stood abruptly, bolting from the room as he sidestepped Ginny, who was standing in the doorway. He managed to get to the second-floor bathroom, slamming the door behind him, in time for his stomach to reprocess his dinner into the toilet. Oh. Sirius had run after Harry, Arthur stopping Molly from following. How could he know what it is? Tonks asked. We don't even know what it is. The room's occupants exchanged glances. They were all thinking the same question: what had happened to Harry during the last task? Oh. Sirius stopped just in time to spare his nose from being broken as the door was slammed shut in his face. He probably should have knocked, but he doubted Harry could have heard over the sound of his own retching. Sirius shut the door behind himself and went to the floor on his knees so he could rub Harry's back. He saved the boy's glasses in the nick of time, folding them into his own collar so they wouldn't risk a watery fate. It was not long until Harry was dry heaving. Which was worrisome. Was he eating enough? Sirius flushed it down before he rose to return with a wet cloth he laid over the back of Harry's neck. It took a bit longer for him to find his voice, each word choking over tears he seemed unwilling to shed. It's my fault they're dead. No, Harry, no, Sirius said softly but with feeling. Your parents loved you. You were their world. Only your death could have destroyed them. Oh. We are so proud of you. You're so brave. Harry heaved again, bringing more pain than relief. What's happened, Harry? Sirius asked. What's happened to you? Harry shook his head and stopped when the motion made the world spin. How did you know about the weapon? It's the prophecy, Harry mumbled. I'm sorry, what did you say? It's the prophecy, the one that made my parents go into hiding, Harry said, looking up to confront Sirius's gaze. Horror and understanding crossed his face. Who told you? Dumbledore? Voldemort, he showed. He was inside of my head. He showed me. Harry broke off and grabbed a towel to wipe his sweaty face. Sirius put a hand on Harry's cheek. How did he show you? He got inside my head, in my dreams, my nightmares. My scar hurt when he was angry or happy. He used me. He wanted me to get it for him. Sirius pulled Harry into his arms, rubbing his back. It's going to be okay, Harry. You're going to be all right. Harry clung to his godfather. Just don't die, Sirius, please. Just don't die. Sirius held him tighter. I am not going to fail you again, son. I am not going to leave you again. But he had, and wounds long pushed aside came tumbling forward. Harry didn't cry, yet Sirius stayed with him in the darkly lit bathroom for hours as Harry tried to work up the will to act normal. He wanted nothing more than to drop out of school and run away with Sirius, run away from Voldemort and the world he had tainted. Oh. A few days later, there was another order meeting. Harry had ardently refused to talk any more about the incident, even to Sirius. Dumbledore began with, "Our top priority must be keeping the door to the room in the dep dash." "Harry says we shouldn't bother with it," Sirius interrupted. Albus whipped his attention toward Sirius. "What does Harry know of the Department of Mysteries? What did you tell him?" "Nothing," Tonks said, ignoring the severity of the headmaster's tone. "He told us what it was, or at least he told Sirius what it was, and he said it didn't matter. That it had already done its damage." "Yes, and we should take Potter at his word about everything, I suppose?" Severus said snidely. "Snape," Sirius said seriously, waiting for the other man to make eye contact. "It's the prophecy." Severus's sallow face drained of all semblance of color, making him look wraith-like. He wet his lips before asking, "And how would Potter know about the prophecy?" "He said the Dark Lord showed him, that he broke into his mind, his nightmares, and showed him," Sirius said. The entire room shifted uneasily. "But that's impossible. Riddle doesn't know the full prophecy. How could Harry?" Albus asked. "More?" Severus asked. He looked like he was going to be sick. "More of that accursed thing? What more could it possibly say?" "It isn't relevant," Albus soothed. "The hell it isn't," Sirius said, slamming his fist on the table. "Lily and James told me what you told them, but Lily thought you left something out, that your speech was too prepared, almost overacted when you told them." "What did you leave out?" "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies." "What's missing? What are you asking us to risk our lives for when Harry seems convinced the only difference the prophecy will make is ensuring Voldemort more obsessed with killing the boy who lived?" Albus looked furious. "Those words were not something I would have had you share." Mrs. Weasley, Mr. Weasley, Bill, Charlie, Nymphadora, Remus, Kingsley, and Hestia looked horrified at the prophecy. "What's missing?" Sirius demanded. Albus sighed, and seeing the growing determination of those around him, he chose to answer him. "And the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have the power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." Minerva was close to tears. "Albus," she said sharply, "Harry cannot be the only way to defeat him. He's lost too much already. How can we ask this of him?" "You told Lily and James this?" Remus asked. "You told her this when she was still pregnant? No wonder she was heartbroken. Why, James was so on edge. They weren't just afraid of Voldemort because they were known Order members. Harry doesn't just have the power to kill him, he has to kill him or be killed by him." It was not a pleasant realization. Oh. What remained of Severus's heart clenched. The pain he had caused Lily even more than her death. He poisoned her last years alive. For not the first time Severus wished it had been him. Wished Albus had caught him at the door and struck him down. Wished James Potter hadn't saved his life and had let Lupin eat him. Wished anything could have changed that wouldn't have led to Lily suffering and dying. If Harry's mind has been infiltrated, then he needs to learn to protect himself. "Severus, you will teach the boy a clemency." Severus nodded numbly. Minerva's temper, however, was visibly building. "You cannot pit the boy against the Dark Lord. I do not care what any prophecy says. Enough of his life has been ruined by foolishness." "Oh. At the rate things are going," Kingsley said in his deep voice, "Harry is his own greatest defense. We can't count on any of us being there when he needs help. We should reconsider withholding information from him. We should enable him to learn more about defensive magic and dueling. And then he will tell his friends." Snape protested. "Harry's not talking to his friends," Sirius said. "He's barely talking to me. Something has happened to him." "Something aside from you-know-who invading his mind?" Arthur asked, sounding uncharacteristically harsh. "Harry is still a child," Albus stated. Sirius frowned at him. If you mean he's human and can make mistakes, then I would agree with you. But show me his childhood. Explain to me how living with the Dursleys and getting killed almost every year at Hogwarts has somehow added to his immaturity. When I talk with him, it isn't a child I am speaking with. He isn't James, Sirius, no matter how much he might look like him, Mrs. Weasley said. I know that. Harry will be told what he needs to be told when the time comes, Albus said. And what about the things Harry might tell us? Sirius asked. He's beginning not to trust you, old man. He gets agitated any time your name is brought up in conversation. What happens when Harry knows more than us and he chooses to leave you in the dark? That will not happen, Albus said, self-assured. Harry might be upset with me for the moment, but he has always trusted me. Sirius and Severus exchanged a look. They were two men who tended to despise one another for the other's weaknesses and screw-ups, but they were also two men who had been left behind by Albus Dumbledore. They trusted him now, not because their gut believed it, but because Albus was one of the only things standing between them and a prison sentence. That fact didn't precisely inspire confidence. But what could they say? Albus always believed himself to be in the right, and there was little anyone could do to change that. At least not before it was too late to change course. However, if they had trusted Dumbledore as their secret keeper, Lily and James might be alive today. Oh. Harry threw 10 gallons into the fountain as he passed, making sure to hide it from Mr. Weasley. He wasn't certain if the man would be hurt by it, but he knew Ron would have been sullen for days. Harry felt some reluctance handing the wand to the guard. Last time he was in the Ministry, everyone had been out for his blood. Much like last time, they ended up rushing to their new appointment. But this time, the stands on his side were not empty. Just as Flitwick had promised, he and McGonagall were in the stands behind him. Albus appeared as his defendant just as he had the first time. This time, however, Albus caught Harry's eye. Harry smiled at them. He caught Madame Bones's gaze. She winked at him and Harry had to suppress another grin. As scary as this dungeon had been the first time around, Harry was now enjoying all of these adults playing house. All their grandeur was mockery of their station, as the majority were cowards who would crumble in a time of true need. Madame Bones was prepared and took control of the courtroom at once. We are all here today because certain members of this ministry have a personal vendetta against Harry James Potter, who has been accused of underage magic. I would like to dismiss this case as I have confirmed that it was under ministry orders that 2 Dementors were sent to Little Whinging, Surrey. I do not know yet who dispatched them, but I do know that Mr. Potter's use of a corporeal Patronus to save his own life and soul as well as his cousins, Dudley Dursley, who Mr. Potter lives with and already knows of the existence of magic, is quite reasonable. I do have all the facts correct, don't I, Mr. Potter? Yes, ma'am, Harry said. The room was silent and Dumbledore looked, as seldom happened, caught off guard. He was standing beside Mrs. Figg, who had not been called to the stand as a witness. It is just a story, Fudge said, and made up. I looked into it after Mr. Potter sent me a letter asking if he could sue us for sending Dementors after him. As I have said, I have not discovered who sent them, but I can confirm that the records show that they were sent. Is there anyone who doubts my word? My office. There was a long silence in which no one dared to go against Madame Bones. She clapped her hands once. Then we are in agreement, Harry J. Potter is cleared of all charges. Thank you, Mr. Potter, Headmaster Dumbledore, Professors Flitwick and McGonagall for your time. You may leave. The rest of you lot will stay to be interviewed about the Dementor incident by my team of Aurors Minister, if you would be so kind as to supervise, seeing as you seem so concerned about this case. I will be in my office getting real work done. Harry was grinning as he ran over to Flitwick and McGonagall. Thanks for coming, professors, Harry said warmly as they made their way to the door which several Aurors were entering through. Albus followed behind them more sedately. Hi, Mrs. Figg, Harry greeted, as they emerged into the hall. Hi, Harry, she replied, drifting to Albus's side. I cannot believe they were going to give you a full criminal hearing. For a minor, Flitwick said. It was amusing to see Madame Bones knock Fudge down a notch, McGonagall said, falling into step beside Harry. You sent Madame Bones a letter, Harry? Albus asked from behind them. Yep, Harry said shortly. Flitwick shot Albus a distinctively cold look. Phileas, is something the matter? Albus asked. Not at all. The situation itself is simply outrageous, Phileas answered. You didn't have to come. I was surprised to see you both in the stands, Dumbledore said. How did you know when the hearing was? It wasn't in the papers. Harry gave me the date and Minerva and I chose to come early, Phileas said. I was not aware the two of you were in correspondence. Harry switched electives, Minerva said. Phileas has been ensuring he can at least start with the 4th years in arithmancy so he isn't 2 years behind. Albus blinked. Which class did you drop, Harry? Divinations, Harry said. I have no talent for it. Besides, Trelawney is more or less the reason my future has always been in the gutter. Professor, Albus corrected. Prophets do not have a choice about their magic. Harry shrugged and switched topics. I really do like arithmancy. The concept of wards is too cool. It reminds me of Muggle maths. Do you miss Muggle school? Phileas asked. Not in the slightest, Harry said. Minerva's lips turned up at the corners. Magic is excellent. And friends, and not having guardians who yell at you for getting better grades than their precious son, Harry said. Minerva's mouth pinched and she glared at Albus. I told you those Muggles were foul, the worst sort of people. Harry blinked. You know the Dursleys? I was there the night Albus insisted you stay with them. I argued against it. It was the safest op-dash. Harry snorted. They had reached Mr. Weasley, who was ready to take him back to Grimmauld Place. Harry turned to meet Albus's gaze. You only care about my safety when it suits you. He turned to the others before the headmaster responded and said, Bye, professors. Thanks again for being here. Mr. Weasley waved to the 3 professors before leading Harry to the exit. Oh. Minerva crossed her arms and glared at Albus. He raised a brow at her. He isn't going back there this coming summer. The BLO dash. No, she cut him off. I will take him in myself if Sirius still isn't cleared, but he isn't going back there. Harry didn't make the Dursleys sound too terrible, Phileas said, gazing after Harry. No, Minerva said sadly, which means it's probably even worse than what little he does complain about them. Albus ran a hand down his white beard, and it was harder than it should have been to shove down his compassion for the boy. Albus had always admired Harry, but now something was changing. Something in the lad, in the order, in his staff. Albus was not sure he was ready for those changes. Chapter 4, A Shift in the Paradigm. Harry almost walked into Lucius Malfoy. He looked up at the well-groomed, proud, blonde pureblood and remembered him unkempt on his knees, remembered him being tortured, remembered him and his wife pleading and fighting for Draco's life. Lucius had such different beliefs from Harry's and yet Harry felt the hatred he had always had for this man fade. Harry would fight him if he tried to hurt someone he cared for, but he pitied the wizard too much to work up enough resentment to hate him. Hello, Mr. Malfoy, Harry greeted cordially. Both Arthur and Lucius froze in what they were going to say and stared down at the boy who lived. Lucius regained himself first. Mr. Potter, he said civilly. Hope you've been enjoying the summer, Harry said. Oh. Lucius wasn't quite gaping openly at Potter as Arthur was, but it was a near thing. It has been refreshingly sunny, Lucius said automatically. How has your summer been? His upbringing more or less demanded he be polite to someone being polite to him unless they were a mudblood or a blood traitor. Harry Potter, by definition, a blood traitor, however, he was too influential to be rude to if the boy had gone out of his way to be civil. I've been reading a lot, trying to catch up on wasted time and all, Potter answered. Lucius raised a brow. Should he probe? Potter was many things, a liar, despite what the papers said, was not among them, which meant that the Dark Lord was back, even if Lucius personally had had no contact with him. Severus hadn't told him anything other than Dumbledore believed Potter and was searching. Draco has been studying as well as the OWLs are this year. I must get on with my business here, Lucius said, trying to extract himself from this bizarre interaction. I trust your trial went in your favor? Harry nodded. It did. Have a good day, Mr. Malfoy. Maybe the world had turned upside down. Oh. Good day, Mr. Potter, Lucius said, a thoughtful expression laying claim to his features. Harry pulled Arthur along to the exit. When they were out of earshot, Arthur demanded, "What was that?" "Manners," Harry replied. "I didn't say anything wrong, did I?" Arthur shook his head. "No, but that was Malfoy." He said Malfoy the way Harry said Wormtail. "You don't have to trust them, but you don't have to treat them like enemies to know that they are," Harry said. Arthur frowned. "He is our enemy." "Maybe, but he is also a self-centered person and a father. He is not a good person, but that does not mean he is incapable of doing good things." "And what are the chances that man does something good for anyone else?" Harry shrugged. "When someone makes him choose between his idea of the way the world should be and his family." Arthur didn't seem to know what to say to that. He clearly wanted to say that Malfoy was all evil, but they both knew Arthur was capable of doing very bad things to save his family. Arthur shook his head again. "You should not trust that man." "I don't," Harry said. "But I don't have to go out of my way to be mean to him either." "You went out of your way to be nice to him," Arthur muttered. Harry grinned up at him. "And the looks on your faces was completely worth it." Arthur laughed as they stepped into the streets of Muggle London. Oh. Sirius and Harry were sitting with Buckbeak in Sirius's mother's room as Harry described the trial. "You really weren't worried?" Sirius asked. "I haven't been preaching that Voldemort is going to come back. That's Dumbledore's gig. I don't think the public hates me enough that the Ministry could get away with snapping my wand. Still, Fudge wanted to do it. Madam Bones didn't give him the chance. He's not evil, but I think he's someone who would help it along," Harry said, resting his chin on his knees. Sirius nodded. "He's jealous of Dumbledore. His weaknesses and insecurities drive him to do stupid things. Not a good combination for a leader." Harry sighed. "Humans aren't the best." Rubbing his beard, Sirius asked more softly, "Harry, why aren't you hanging out with Ron and Hermione?" He shrugged. "I'll be with them all year. I have one night left to spend with you." Sirius smiled. "I'm going to miss you." "Not as much as I've missed you," Harry thought. "How hard is it to become an animagus?" Grinning, Sirius answered, "Harder yet simpler than you would think. James had an easier time with it than I did. It involves a lot of soul-searching, or in my case, a lot of trusting your own magic. James was able to picture his animal form before his first time. I just jumped into it and well, James and I practiced transfiguring him into a rat, and eventually he figured it out for himself." "Wait, so did you guys pick a rat for his form?" Harry asked. "No, there is a transfiguration spell that just turns people into an animal, a non-specified animal. Most people don't use it in duels because there is always the chance the person turns into a lion and then you're in worse shape than you were with the human, magical or otherwise. So why did my dad have an easier time with it than you?" Sirius put a hand into his curls, pulling gently at his scalp. "James was more comfortable with himself. Of course, why shouldn't he have been? He was rich, talented, good-looking, and had parents who loved him. Your grandparents, Harry, were remarkable people. They took me in when I ran away at 16. At any rate, James liked who he was, knew who he was. Sure, he was full of himself and big-headed at times, but he never had a problem with who he was. Me, on the other hand, well, did Remus ever tell you about what I did to Snape?" Harry shook his head. He knew the story, but he'd never heard Sirius tell it. "Well, we were always picking on Snape. We were bullies, really. Not that Snavellis didn't give as good as he got, but we were usually the ones to start it. That the girl James was gone on was Snape's best friend made him a constant irritant to James." "My mum's best friend was Snape?" Harry asked. He knew that Snape had been friends with his mom, but not that they had mutually been that close. "Yep, Lily was... how do I say this? Lils was a bit like Hermione. Brilliant, bull-headed, and not always the easiest person to like until you really got to know her. She was a lot to take in, but she was unfailingly kind. You got that from her." Harry smiled. It was rare anyone told him he was like her, beyond the color of his eyes. "At any rate, as we got older, I think our pranks got meaner, as did Snape. He figured out there was something up with Remus and he kept watching us. You have to understand, Harry, that I honestly believed that if Snape found out about Remus being a werewolf, he would find a way to get him expelled. Or worse, if his friends got involved. Aside from Greyback, Voldemort isn't kind to those who are less than pure, less than loyal. Why did you hate him so much? It always seems personal between you two. I mean, I know why I hate, because now he's the bully. Sirius let out a breath. Snape was tacit friends with my little brother. After all I did to protect Reggie from the worst of our parents. There he was with some half-blood determined to join a cult that would happily massacre his entire family. His muggle father for what he was and his mother for polluting the prince line. He even went by half-blood prince, the absolute twat. Mind you, Snape never came off as someone with a loving family, but I doubt his family was shoving the garbage about blood purity mine was. Because Harry knew them all now. Andromeda Tonks had been tortured for Harry's sake. He asked, "How did your cousins handle it?" Sirius snorted. My sisters, cousins, but raised as sisters, did not handle the pressure well. Bella was not crazy her entire life. When we were children, she was actually quite kind, always high-spirited, but she was a whimsical child. She never cared about appearances, until she got into Hogwarts and my aunt beat that care into her. Being the oldest, she took the brunt of it, and like Regulus, as the youngest, Narcissa learned well enough by example. If her father ever raised a hand to her, it wasn't out of need. And Andromeda? Sirius smiled. She was my favorite, still is, though I doubt she thinks well of me, no, even if her daughter has told her about me. Andromeda was a quiet pillar of strength, with a wicked sense of humor. She had a particular mischief about her, and unlike me, she was able to put aside her ego well enough to never get caught for it. She was, at one point, meant to be my wife. Harry choked. What? Originally, I was engaged to Bella, but then I was sorted into Gryffindor and that flew out the window. You can't be serious. She's your first cousin. Sirius barked a rough laugh. More than my first. Both my parents shared the same last name before they were married, if you remember. Despite my delinquent ways, I was still heir to House of Black and my aunt still wanted her direct line to inherit, even if my reputation wasn't grand enough for her eldest. Andy married Ted when I was 16 and I gave her back her dowry. My mother nearly murdered me for it. That's when I ran. Harry shook his head. Your line didn't marry siblings, did they? Sirius patted his knee. Don't worry. Despite wizards keeping their witches under lock and key, none of the lines are as pure as they want them to be. Harry gave him a suspicious look. And what does that mean? Sirius smiled. Fertility potions are a bit iffy. For instance, you can permanently turn a woman into a man, but it's 50-50 whether or not that child could sire children or vice versa. At least it was when I was a child. I don't know what medical advances have been made since then. Add that to the fact that inbreeding is infamous for causing fertility concerns, and well, witches over the centuries have found their own ways in acquiring children. A few glamour spells, and no one ever has to know that a witch's spouse need never attend his duties. Harry blinked. You mean? Sirius grinned. I mean, I'm a black, regrettably, through and through, as I am my mother's child. But whether my father was my sire, I will never know. The spells for tracking such things have laws against their use and they are non-applicable in court. Really? Harry asked, fascinated. One too many lords cheated out of their inheritance, and there was a time witches were executed for infidelity, even if it wasn't by choice. Merlin was the one who put an end to that nearly 1,000 years ago. Harry's expression must have been greatly contorted because Sirius chuckled and ruffled his hair. You see how much I hated it? The history I came from? I'll never understand anyone who wants to be a pureblood. Hogwarts was my first escape from it. Figures my first friend would be a pureblood. But the Potters were practically a blood traitor, like the Weasleys. It was the best years of my life. Then there was Snape, dabbling in the dark arts, courting baby Death Eaters, pulling my little brother into something he wasn't ready for. My parents were horrible people who believed everything Voldemort did. But they never threw in with him, not their lives, futures, or money. But Reggie did, because he wanted to be like the genius potions master a year ahead of him, who his brother didn't like. And with all of that, Snape wouldn't stop following Lily around, a young witch who was Muggle-born during a civil war. I don't think he ever understood how much danger he put her in. I had more reasons to hate Snape than the others, and when he started sniffing around Remus, I did something unforgivable. 2 wrongs do not make a right, as you have reminded me in the past. When Snape didn't let it go, I goaded him into finding a way to the Shrieking Shack on the full moon. Did you mean to kill him? Harry asked. No, Sirius said, his face flushed with shame. At least I wasn't thinking that far ahead. But I was a fool because I should have acknowledged that Snape could have gotten killed or turned, which no child deserves. I think I hurt Remus more than anyone there, though. Had Remus woken up to either having turned someone else or killing Severus, he took a deep breath. Frankly, I am surprised Remus ever forgave me. Neither he nor James talked to me for weeks afterwards, and I had detention for the rest of the year. By rights, I should have been expelled, but Albus is very good at giving second chances, especially to people who probably don't deserve it. You're not a bad person, Harry said. Sirius smiled sadly. I'm far from perfect. It's why when I became an animagus I wasn't able to see what I would be, because I wasn't willing to look that deep. So I jumped blindly, knowing I was strong enough magically to achieve it. I was a dog, and it was great until I saw my reflection. Figures I would be a grim, an omen of death. Harry put a hand on Sirius's shoulder. I've made mistakes too. Not ones that resulted in people dying, Harry, Sirius said. Harry felt his heart ache, and he wanted to tell Sirius that he had, so many times over. In truth, Harry wasn't even sure he was aware of everyone who had died on his behalf. But he wasn't ready to tell Sirius about the future. A future Harry had every intention of changing. Yet, Harry's years before 5th hadn't exactly been easy either. I killed Professor Quirrell. Sirius blinked. What? Quirinus Quirrell. I killed him in my first year. Sirius looked lost. Why? How? Why didn't anyone tell me? Dumbledore hushed it up, I think. His death was a terrible accident. But it wasn't, I killed him and I didn't have to. Had I just kept my nose out of it, Dumbledore's Mirror of Erist would have kept it safe. Keep what safe? The Philosopher's Stone. What was that doing at Hogwarts, and why would Quirinus want? He was working for Voldemort? He had Voldemort sticking out of the back of his head. He wore a turban to class. He was our Dada professor. Sirius just stared at Harry for a moment. Finally, he asked, How did you kill him? I held onto his face. That doesn't make any sense. Harry, how does holding onto his face kill a wizard plus a Dark Lord? Whatever my mother did to save me, it kept the Dark Lord from being able to touch me. Touching hurts us both, but it burned Quirrell's face and I held on even when I passed out. It resulted in killing Quirrell. Voldemort got away as a spirit. You were 11? Sirius asked. Yes. Merlin, Harry, why didn't you ask for help? We told McGonagall someone was after the stone. We thought it was Snape, but he turned out to be protecting the thing. Hermione figured out how to get by Fluffy and the plants. I caught the key and Ron won the chess match, while Hermione got past the potions. I got Voldemort Quirrell and the stone in the mirror. Harry, Quirrell was a fully fledged wizard. He could have killed you. I killed him first, and if I had been smarter, I wouldn't have been in that situation. Harry-Sirius was cut off when Mrs. Weasley knocked on the door. Come on out, you two. We are celebrating, she called. Buckbeak squawked at the door, annoyed on their behalf, before combing his beak through Harry's hair. Coming, Molly? Sirius called. Harry sighed up at Buckbeak. Happy. Buckbeak huffed at him. We need finish this conversation, but I wanted to ask you before we go down about how you're feeling about being passed up as prefect. Are you disappointed? You haven't been talking much to your friends as much. Is it because of this? I am not upset about it. I don't want the responsibility. Especially, since I have to take a clemency with Snape. Harry couldn't keep the distaste out of his voice. He never wanted another person in his mind, least of all with all the secrets he had now. Snape or Dumbledore knowing he was a Harry from the future was nothing but trouble. You seem so distant with them. You sent me a lot of letters this summer. Did you exchange of them with them? I am sure Hermione would talk with you about schoolwork for hours. It isn't them, Sirius, it's me. After the last task, after seeing Wormtail and Voldemort again, it just sort of hit me. This life isn't a game, I could have died, and if Cedric was with me, it isn't a fairy tale, some adventure, people could get hurt permanently. I am having a hard time keeping my patience with Ron and even Hermione. She's brilliant, but she also assumes she knows everything, or at least is capable of understanding everything and anything. She thinks you can learn it in a book, and that everyone has the same moral compass. But you can't, there are some things that you just can't understand. Right and wrong isn't so black and white. Sirius looked at Harry as if he had never seen him before. You're a wiser and a better man than I will ever be. Just promise you'll try to have fun this year. Don't take life so seriously you forget to enjoy what you have. Harry nodded, holding on a bit too tightly as Sirius pulled him in for a hug. Not to be outdone, Buckbeak wrapped a wing around them both, hugging them between his wing and feathered neck. Hey, Sirius? Harry asked, pausing at the open door with the rattling cabinet that housed the bogut. Can I borrow your wand? Sirius looked into the room. You want to take care of the bogut? Didn't I just tell you to have fun? Ridiculous is fun, Harry said innocently. Sirius rolled his eyes but stood back, waving Harry forward, passing him his wand. Harry swished the wand that seemed to purr in his hand, not like it saw him as a master but like a cat momentarily approving of him. The cabinet unlocked and the bogut emerged. Shifted, and it wasn't a Dementor that emerged, but his mother. She was beautiful, fiery hair, shining emerald eyes so similar to his own. She held out her hand, beckoning him forward, and what she said sent a chill down to his very soul. Harry, my son, this dream is ending. Harry screamed a ridiculous at her, and she shattered into glass shards as if she had been a stained glass window. The shards whirled into a small vortex, shrinking into a spot on the floor. The resurrection stone rested inertly on the ground, and Harry understood what his fear was. He feared his parents wanted him dead, that Sirius wanted him dead, that Harry himself really was dead, and the second chance was nothing more than a dream. He raised Sirius's wand again and almost whispered, "Ridiculous." The stone turned into sand and faded into nothing, defeated. It wasn't funny, but it was a joke that was at Harry's suspense. Harry turned to give Sirius his wand back. Sirius and Snape were standing in the doorway. Snape was staring at the place where Lily had been standing. "Harry, Sirius, come down to eat," Mrs. Weasley called. Mrs. Black's portrait started shrieking. Sirius took his wand back and went to go shut up his own mother, giving Harry a parting look, though he didn't pry. Sirius knew better than most that nightmares rarely took illogical shapes. But there was someone else standing in the doorway who was far less sympathetic. Oh. Severus couldn't move, staring at the spot where Potter's greatest fear had stood. Finally, he pulled his gaze away to focus on the boy. "You're afraid of Lily? Your own mother?" "No," Potter answered. "I'm afraid that by dying for me, she died for nothing. Just one more sorrow in a lineage of pain and suffering." Snape said nothing, could say nothing, only wonder at the boy who, as it would appear, he knew nothing about. Oh. Harry stayed up late that night with Sirius. They avoided any more emotionally depressing stories, and Sirius stuck to stories about transfiguration and detentions with James and McGonagall. Sirius seemed better, more stable, than he had been last time around. Harry would say he was surprised by the difference a few letters had helped, but they had helped Harry just as much. Harry felt that he was able to convince Sirius to stay safe at Grimmauld Place. Even so, their group was almost late getting onto the Hogwarts Express. Hermione and Ron went up front with the prefects with the same apologies and appeasements. Harry watched them go with a feeling of profound relief. It was becoming quite aggravating to pretend he was normal around them. The rest of the year was going to be long. His friends weren't stupid, they knew something had changed in him, but for now, they were letting it go when he evaded questions about how he was or when he did something out of character. Harry had resorted to keeping his mouth mostly shut around them and only speaking when he had to, which was a bad sign in and of itself. Yet Ron and Hermione seemed to attribute his behavior to his long summer at the Dursleys with only 2.5 weeks at Grimmauld Place with Sirius. Harry was barely paying attention as he took Hedwig and his luggage and followed Ginny. Ginny, who was now his ex-girlfriend. He still liked her, but seeing her younger, like she had been before the Department of Ministry, before her mettle had been tested, he found he was more protective of her than felt anything romantic toward her. He missed his Ginny. He missed his Ron and Hermione. People looked at him through windows and whispered to each other. Harry ignored them. They met Neville in the hall in front of Luna's compartment. Harry greeted Neville, then took a seat beside Luna, not waiting for Ginny or Neville. Luna wouldn't look at him like he was freak, or acting odd, or anything irritating that had his instincts honed by nearly a year of being hunted standing on end. "Hi, Luna. Can we sit with you?" She looked up from her copy of the Quibbler, her wand behind her ear, and her eyes unblinking as she looked into him. The corner of her mouth turned up. "Hello, Harry. Thanks for letting us join you," said Ginny with a smile. "How was your summer?" he asked her, the blonde. Harry didn't know why exactly, but it felt like Luna was the Luna from his time. Or maybe it was the fact that Harry knew for a fact that time travel wasn't something she would be overly surprised by or hold against him. She put her magazine down and ran a hand over her long blonde curls. "Oh, it was good. Quite lovely, really." She didn't say what had been lovely about it, but Neville spoke before he could answer. "Guess what I got for my birthday?" "A plant," Harry guessed and slipped out his wand. He was not getting slimed on this time around. Neville grinned, holding up the pot proudly. "Mimbulus Mimbletonia." Harry smiled, though he already had his wand at the ready. "It looks cool. What can it do?" "It's really, really rare," said Neville, beaming. "I don't know if there's one in the greenhouse at Hogwarts, even. I can't wait to show it to Professor Sprout. My great-uncle Algie got it for me in Assyria. I'm gonna see if I can breed from it. It's got an amazing defensive mechanism. Here, hold Trevor for me." "Neville, I don't think that is a good idea," Harry started, but he was too late. Harry's shield charm saved Luna and himself, but Ginny and Neville. "Sorcery," he gasped. "I haven't tried that before. Didn't realize it would be quite so. Don't worry, though, stinksap's not poisonous," he added nervously, looking at Ginny, who spat out a mouthful onto the floor. At that precise moment, the door of their compartment slid open. "Oh, hello, Harry," said a nervous voice. Bad time." It was Cho Chang, the seeker on the Ravenclaw Quidditch team. "Hi," said Harry. Cho was still pretty, but Harry no longer had the slightest interest. He hadn't since dating Ginny. "How's Cedric?" Harry asked. "Don't know, we broke up," she said. "Well, just thought I'd say hello. Bye then." Rather pink in the face, she closed the door and departed. Neville was still apologizing to glowering Ginny when Harry flicked his wand. "Scourgify!" The stinksap vanished. "Sorry," said Neville again in a small voice. Ron and Hermione did not turn up for nearly an hour, by which time the food trolley had already gone by. "I'm starving," said Ron, stowing Pigwidgeon next to Hedwig, grabbing a chocolate frog from Harry and throwing himself into the seat next to him. He ripped open the wrapper, bit off the frog's head and leaned back with his eyes closed as asked, "Guess who's a Slytherin prefect?" "Draco," Harry said as he flipped through a copy of the Quibbler Luna had given him. "Course," said Ron bitterly, stuffing the rest of the frog into his mouth and taking another. "And that complete cow Pansy Parkinson," said Hermione viciously. "How she got to be a prefect when she's thicker than a concussed troll?" Harry pointed to an article about Disney Paris. "I want to try that." "What?" Ron asked. Luna looked over and smiled. "It would be fun. Performing magic tricks at a Muggle amusement park," Harry explained. "That's illegal," Hermione said. Harry shrugged. "Not if you're not harming anyone or doing stuff that can't be accomplished without magic, like levitation or sparks or making birds appear. It would be fun to do in front of children who believe and parents who don't and know that it really is real." Ron looked at Harry. "You want to entertain Muggle children? For one afternoon it might be fun." Luna nodded. "I can't wait to catch Malfoy and his goons at something. I'll make Goyle do lines. It'll kill him, he hates writing," said Ron happily. He lowered his voice to Goyle's low grunt and, screwing up his face in a look of pained concentration, mimed writing in midair. "I must Not, look, like, baboon's backside. Everyone laughed, but nobody laughed harder than Luna Lovegood. She laughed so hard her magazine slipped out of her grasp, slid down her legs, and onto the floor. Ron looked around at the others, who were now laughing at the expression on Ron's face as she continued to laugh. Baboon's backside, she choked, holding her ribs. Harry grinned at her laughing. Anything good in there? Asked Ron as Harry closed the magazine. Of course not, Hermione said scathingly, before Harry could answer. The Quibbler's rubbish. Everyone knows that. Hermione, Harry said sharply. Mr. Lovegood is the editor of the Quibbler. Hermione's cheeks darkened as she stumbled over an apology. The compartment door opened, and Harry chose to do the same thing he had to Mr. Malfoy. Hello, Draco. How are you? I saw your father at the ministry yesterday. He said you've already been studying for the OWLs. Have you gotten far with the history book yet? I swear the book is more use than Professor Binns. Draco was floored by this greeting and by Harry's apparently sincere demeanor. He isn't the most interesting professor, is he? Luna asked. Pity. I thought it would have been fun to learn from a ghost. The Bloody Baron would be a good storyteller, I'd bet, Harry replied to her. Draco stood frozen in the doorway and Harry had to bite his cheek at the mirror of Lucius's expression he was wearing, and like his father, training kicked in. I'm rather good at history. It is the Dada book that is giving me trouble. I don't know what we will learn in that class that might be useful for OWLs. I was thinking of starting a Dada club this year, Harry said causally, so students can practice outside of class. Might be fun, Draco said warily. I need to go keep checking the train, me being a prefect and all. He was starting to build up his steam again only to be thoroughly deflated by Harry's next remark. Yeah, congratulations, it's a big achievement. See you around. Oh. Draco was at a complete loss. He could not detect the slightest bit of sarcasm from Potter's tone. He stepped back, shut the door, and walked away with Crabbe and Goyle at his heels. He felt as if he had just entered an alternate universe where Potter hadn't rebuffed his offer of friendship. Oh. Ron, Hermione, and Neville gaped at him. I think the Bloody Baron might be too descriptive and then we wouldn't have time to learn all the facts, Luna said, continuing the conversation. At least I wouldn't be tempted to doze off in class, Harry quipped. I like sketching in his class while I listen. I just take the notes from the book, she said, her large blue eyes staring at him unblinkingly. Smart, Harry said. Harry, Ron questioned, outraged. What the bloody hell was that? What was what? You were nice to Malfoy. Yeah, and he left us alone, Harry rebuked. Hermione was frowning at him. Did you mean what you said? About what? About a Dada club? Harry shrugged. It seems like fun, and as long as we don't have someone like Lockhart running it might be helpful. They all rode in silence after that. Harry took Hedwig out of her cage and petted her as he watched the world speed by outside the train window. Hedwig hopped onto his lap so Luna could pet her too. When they reached the courageous Harry rested Hedwig's cage on his trunk so he could pet the nearest thestral. They were supremely soft. Their leathery-looking skin was covered with the finest fuzz of black fur. Looked into the thestral's white eye and smiled. He wondered if dying gave him a closer bound to these animals because the great head rubbed into Harry's touch and made a pleased clicking noise in its throat. Harry, Hermione started. What are you petting? Come on, let's get a carriage together before they all fill up, Ron urged. Seriously, what are you doing? Hermione asked. Just petting the carriage horse? Harry answered. Ron looked seriously alarmed now. Are you feeling all right, Harry? Harry lingered, part of him overjoyed to be back at Hogwarts, as other part of him dreaded the beginning of this year. Shall we get in, then? Ron asked, greatly concerned. Luna came to stand with Harry. I can see them, too. They're nicer than you think they would be, Harry remarked, giving the thestral a soft pat on the shoulder. You're nicer than I thought you would be, she said. Harry looked at her, but she only smiled faint before climbing into the carriage. Chapter 5 Trouble on Purpose. They received their timetables at breakfast. Harry glanced at his before slipping it into his bag. Monday was potions, defense against the dark arts, and arithmancy in place of divinations. Harry hadn't told either Ron or Hermione that he had switched classes. He expected a fight, and he just didn't want to explain himself. Keeping things from them was far easier than lying to them outright. "That's the worst scheduled day ever," Ron groaned. Harry sighed. "What's wrong, Harry?" Hermione asked. He looked up at the head table. Umbridge was watching all the students like a frog gauging the distance of a fly it intended to eat. "Just another miss for Dada." "You don't think we will learn anything from her?" Hermione asked, almost glaring up at the pink toad. "Hermione," Harry said, "you've read that book, that bit about counter curses. It would be better to skip her class." "You can't skip class, Harry," she said instantly. Then she paused, giving him a strange look. Ron was the one to ask. Gaze narrowed. "You read the book?" "I skimmed it enough to know it less informative than the Lockhart books, and at least those were entertaining and based on real events, sans Lockhart himself." "It isn't the best of books, but it has some substance," Hermione defended, as she would likely defend any published book. Harry suddenly didn't feel like eating. Only habit forced him to finish what little was left on his plate and got up to leave. "Oh. Does Harry seem off to you?" Ron asked Hermione, whose eyes, along with many others, watched the raven-haired boy leave. Hermione nodded. "He was different after the last task and at Grimmauld Place, but the changes were not that noticeable until he started being polite to Malfoy," Ron interjected bitterly. "Maybe it's a good thing, Ron," she placated. "Or maybe there's something wrong with him." Hermione frowned at her plate, her mind trying to put a reason to the million little things that were different about their best friend. Maybe something more has happened at the graveyard that he hadn't told them about. Oh. Harry sat in the common room reading a potions theory book, which he was starting to realize was more like baking than anything else. You had a lot more freedom when you were cooking meals, but if you were making a cake and you left out baking soda, the whole thing was ruined. It was with this mindset that Harry read the tips on the proper ways to handle plants and adding certain liquids to potions. He would force Snape to give him an outstanding even if it took destroying reality to get it. Harry took off his shoes and curled up in the armchair, leaning towards the fire. His body felt cold. He always felt cold nowadays, even in the heavy heat of summer. He didn't know why, but he couldn't get warm, as if his bones were in a cooler. He noticed in a dim sort of way that people were coming into the room. He nearly jumped out of his skin when Fred touched his shoulder. "Harry," Fred asked. "You all right?" George asked. "Yeah, you startled me is all," Harry said, closing his book, as he was just rereading it at this point anyway. "What are you reading?" George asked. Harry showed them the cover. Fred laughed. "You trying to get a leg up in potions?" "I think I want to be good at this subject just so I can spite the old bat." George grinned. "We have a few books we can lend you that helped us." "That would be awesome. This book is just tips on how to handle different materials." The twins looked down at the book in unison. "Is it any good?" they asked. Harry nodded and handed it to them. "You can borrow it if you like. I have already finished it. I was just looking over a couple of the more detailed descriptions." "Thanks, Harry," George said. "You're a great friend," Fred said. "What did you do, Harry?" Ron asked, coming up behind them. "So suspicious, Ickle Prefect," Fred said, turning on his younger brother. "With that tone, it makes it sound like you think we are up to something," George added with a sly smile. "You two are always up to something," Hermione pointed out. Harry stood, stretched, and headed up to bed while Ron and Hermione were still bickering with the twins. Oh. Harry's dreams were strange. He stood in front of the mirror of Ariste, staring at his scar. It burst open, blood poured down one side of his face. It didn't hurt as the dark blood masked over half his face, nor when it got into his one eye. However, that green eye turned to red. Both his eyes gleamed unnaturally in the darkened space, glowing from the mirror. One eye like Voldemort's and the other shining emerald like his Boggart mother's. Oh. Harry lurched out of bed, panting slightly though he luckily didn't wake anyone. He got dressed and went down to breakfast early, slipping out with the quietness living with Dursleys had beaten into him. The hall was mostly empty as it was barely 6 a.m., but among the students at breakfast, Draco Malfoy was one of them sitting alone at the Slytherin table. Harry thought of the Sorting Hat's warning and remembered how staying divided literally brought down the school. Screw it, Harry thought, it's not like he is a Death Eater yet. That was next year. Besides, Draco had protected him against the Snatchers. Harry made a beeline for the white-haired Slytherin. He sat down at the table and waited for Draco to look up at him. He did, and his pale eyes widened at Harry Potter's appearance. "Good morning," Harry said cheerfully. "Good more." Draco had to stop himself. It looked as though he had to bite his tongue. "Did you get hit in the head or something? This is the Slytherin table." Harry grinned. "I almost sorted into Slytherin, you know?" Draco gaped at him as if the world had fallen down around his ears. He spluttered, "What?" Harry smiled. "I begged the Sorting Hat not to put me in the same house as you and the man who murdered my parents." Oh. Draco blinked, at a loss on how to handle this more amenable Potter. Draco figured it was some type of ploy to get at him, so he asked, "What do you want?" "What do you think about a Dada Club? You said so yourself that the book was useless." Draco felt like he was in an alternate universe. "My father said." "Your father doesn't work for the Ministry, and newsflash, Draco, but the Ministry doesn't want us learning magic that can be used against them." Draco frowned. "You want to start a club and get a professor to teach an extra class?" He remembered Lockhart's club and how well that had gone. "No, I'll teach it. I have a feeling Umbridge isn't going to let us use magic in class," Harry said. "And I feel like you are mental and Umbridge isn't going to like you teaching her subject outside of class," Draco shot back. "Then we do it in secret," Harry supplied. "I know a place." "And you think you can teach me anything, that your bet?" "I am the best student in the school for Dada. It is my subject. You, on the other hand, are the dumb arse who taunted a hippogriff after Hagrid told you they were proud creatures who never forgive insults." Draco flushed and glared. "Get lost, Potter." Harry shrugged. "We have Dada today. Let me know when you decide you want to pass your OWLs." Draco fisted his hands and looked around the room. There was no one at the Slytherin table, but the smattering of students at the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables had all been watching. At the head table, only Professors McGonagall and Flitwick were there to witness the oddity of Potter. In all honesty, Draco would have loved to have been friends with Potter. His friends only hung out with him because their fathers had commanded them to when they were little. Oh. Harry went back to the Gryffindor table, finished a piece of toast and an apple for heading down to the dungeons. He had some extra time to read the Twins Potions book they had lent him before heading down to the dungeons. Their first potions classes ended with Harry and Draco getting their potions close to perfect. Hermione's potion was probably a distant third in the class. Harry smirked as Snape frowned down at his as described simmering potion. Oh. Severus looked between Granger's potion and Potter's. Potter's was the better of the two. Which was impossible. Potter was hopeless in this subject unless Granger was cheating for him. However, Granger was far too vain to let Potter achieve a better grade than her. Weasley wasn't of any help. His potion was toxic. No, the only student in the class who could have achieved this was Draco, who Severus sometimes tutored in the summers. Draco and Potter would never work together, meaning Potter had somehow gotten better at potions. Snape turned his wrath on Weasley. Mocking Potter's abysmal potion skills was typically the highlight of his day. "Oh. What was that?" Ron asked, spitting mad. Sure, Snape had picked on him before, but he had never been the professor's primary focus. That was either Harry or Neville. "I am not going to fail his class," Harry said. "Your potion was better than Hermione's," Ron said. Hermione's mouth tightened. "I have to get to ancient runes." Harry sighed. "You knew she would react like that," Ron accused. "I just don't understand how you could have done better than her in the first place." "I studied over the summer." "Why?" Ron asked. "Because what else was I supposed to do locked up at the Dursleys, Ron? In case you're not aware, you and Hermione are my only friends." How many letters did we exchange? How much did you hear from me? Did you ever stop to think what it's like to have no one to talk to other than an old lady across the street who only talks about her cats? The most human interaction I get is my aunt and uncle ordering me to do chores and make them food. So, yeah, I read books and did my summer homework. Sorry to disappoint you, Harry snapped. Ron flinched, then asked as Harry began to turn down a different corridor, "Where are you going?" "Arithmancy. And don't worry about telling Trelawney. She must have seen it coming." Ron stopped and watched his best friend walk alone down the hall into the mass of other students. Harry had changed and Ron wasn't sure he liked the new Harry. Arithmancy held in a bright, large windowed room. The tables were low and square and there were 4 pillows at each. Harry smiled when he saw Luna, who had spotted him the second he walked into the room. "Harry," she greeted. "Harry," Susan asked, whipping her head around. "Hi, Harry," she cheered. "Hi, Susan. Hi, Luna," Harry said, taking his seat between them. "Thank Merlin. I am not the only one from our year who switched electives. Of course, I switched last year, so I had to do the first class," Susan said. "I covered the first year's work over the summer. Flitwick graded the homework and Professor Vector sent me the tests. I got the okay to only go back the 1 year," Harry said. "I got to move forward a year," the Slytherin girl with golden blonde hair sat across from Harry. "Harry," Susan began, "this is Astoria Greengrass. Astoria, this is Dash." "Harry Potter, I'm aware," she said coolly. Harry smiled. "You and your sister sound alike." She glared at him. "How would you know? You hate Slytherins." "No, I dislike Draco and his 2 shadows, and sometimes Pansy and Millicent." "Your sister is nice though," Harry said. "My sister isn't nice. She's awesome, but she isn't nice." "Well, by nice, I mean she isn't loud and annoying," Harry corrected himself. "Because that isn't the exact definition of a Gryffindor?" she shot back. "You are the attention-hogging boy who lived." "Hey, I never asked to be famous for surviving my parents getting murdered. I would gladly trade my fame for my mother's life," Harry snapped. "Like you can even remember her," Astoria said, not letting go of her advantage. "I remember her screaming for my life and what it looked like when Voldemort hit her with the killing curse. Trauma sticks with you." Astoria looked away, her cheeks flushing. "Sorry," she muttered. "My parents were killed by him too," Susan said softly. They were all spared further discussion on the topic of dead parents as Professor Vector took control of the class. She was a stern witch, and though her class seemed to be a numerical way of predicting the future, her class began to go into wards, in numerical architecture that aligned with the stars, like tombs in Egypt or mosques in the Near East. With arithmancy, numbers and patterns had power. Hermione was right about it being a far better class than divinations. The groups of 4 worked together on a circular diagram on their table. Between the 4 of them, they did really well. Professor Vector gave Harry an approving nod. "You'll catch up quickly with this group, and your presence evens out the class, so now every table has 4. "Splendid." As they were leaving class, Luna said to him softly, "On the train, your shield charm." "It was instinct," Harry said. "You cast it without speaking a spell," she said. Harry missed a step. She smiled at him. "I don't think the others noticed." They parted ways when they got to the Great Hall for lunch. "Oh, you dropped divinations?" Hermione asked as soon as he sat down. "Didn't Ron tell?" Harry asked, pulling a few slices of apple onto his plate. "Yeah, he said you've been studying all summer," she said. "I didn't think you would have a problem with that," Harry said without looking at her. "You hate studying." Harry looked up at her then. "Like I told Ron, I hate living with the Dursleys and I had nothing better to do with my time." She opened her mouth to protest. He cut her off. "Hermione, give it a rest. Can't you just be happy or proud or something other than upset? I didn't tell you every aspect of my life." She nearly bit off her tongue. "That's not fair. And it's not fair for you to be mad that I did better than you on 1 potions assignment either." None of the 3 of them talked to each other through the rest of lunch. "Oh, Harry settled in to do his arithmancy homework, having transfigured the textbook to look like the Dada book. Like last time, Hermione raised her hand. "Did you want to ask something about the chapter, dear?" Umbridge asked Hermione, as though she had only just noticed her. "Not about the chapter, no." "Well, we're reading just now," Professor Umbridge said with a sanguine smile. "If you have other queries, we can deal with them at the end of class." "I've got a query about your course aims," Hermione forged onwards. Professor Umbridge raised her eyebrows. "And your name is?" "Hermione Granger." "Well, Miss Granger, I think the course aims are perfectly clear if you read them through carefully," Professor Umbridge said, her voice falsely sweet. "Well, I don't," Hermione said bluntly. "There's nothing written up there about using defensive spells." Harry hid a smile as everyone except him looked up to the blackboard. "Using defensive spells?" Professor Umbridge repeated with a little laugh. "Why, I can't imagine any situation arising in my classroom that would require you to use a defensive spell, Miss Granger. You surely aren't expecting to be attacked during class." "Because that had never happened before," mused Harry silently as he thought of Lockhart's pixies. "We're not going to use magic?" Ron exclaimed loudly. "Students raise their hands when they wish to speak in my class, Mr. Dash?" "Weasley," said Ron, thrusting his hand into the air. Professor Umbridge, smiling still more widely, turned her back on him. Hermione immediately raised her hand too. Professor Umbridge's poachy eyes lingered on Harry for a moment before she addressed Hermione. "Yes, Miss Granger? You wanted to ask something else?" "Yes," Hermione said. "Surely the whole point of defense against the dark arts is to practice defensive spells? Are you a ministry-trained educational expert, Miss Granger?" Professor Umbridge asked with condescension. "No, but Dash." "Well then, I'm afraid you are not qualified to decide what the whole point of any class is. Wizards much older and cleverer than you have devised our new program of study. You will be learning about defensive spells in a secure, risk-free way. Dash." "Because Hogwarts is known for being risk-free?" Harry snorted. He couldn't help himself. "If we're going to be attacked, it won't be in a hand, Mr. Potter," sang Professor Umbridge. Professor Umbridge promptly turned away from him, but now several other people had their hands up, too. "And your name is?" Professor Umbridge said to Dean. "Dean Thomas." "Well, Mr. Thomas?" "Well, it's like Harry said, isn't it?" said Dean. "If we're going to be attacked, it won't be risk-free." "I repeat," Professor Umbridge said forcefully, though kept her smile plastered on. "Do you expect to be attacked during my classes?" "Yes," Harry said, garnering a number of laughs from his classmates. Professor Umbridge scowled at him. "I do not wish to criticize the way things have been run in this school," she said, an unconvincing smile stretching her mouth wider. "But you have been exposed to some very irresponsible wizards in this class. Very irresponsible indeed, not to mention." She gave a nasty little laugh. "Extremely dangerous half-breeds." "If you mean Professor Lupin," piped up Dean angrily, "he was the best we ever dash. Hand, Mr. Thomas. As I was saying, you have been introduced to spells that have been complex, inappropriate to your age group, and potentially lethal. You have been frightened into believing that you are likely to meet dark attacks every other day. Dash." "No, we haven't," Hermione said. "We just dash." "Your hand is not up, Miss Granger." Hermione put up her hand. Professor Umbridge turned away from her. "It is my understanding that my predecessor not only performed illegal curses in front of you, he actually performed them on you." "Well, he turned out to be a maniac, didn't he?" said Dean hotly. "Mind you, we still learned loads." "Your hand is not up, Mr. Thomas," trilled Professor Umbridge. "Now, it is the view of the Ministry that a theoretical knowledge will be more than sufficient to get you through your examination, which, after all, is what school is all about. And your name is?" she added, staring at Parvati, whose hand had just shot up. "Parvati Patil, and isn't there a practical bit in our defense against the dark arts OWL? Aren't we supposed to show that we can actually do the counter-curses and things? As long as you have studied the theory hard enough, there is no reason why you should not be able to perform the spells under carefully controlled examination conditions," said Professor Umbridge dismissively. Without ever practicing them beforehand? Said Parvati incredulously. Are you telling us that the first time we'll get to do the spells will be during our exam? Draco caught Harry's gaze from across the room. He looked torn. Harry was the only hope anyone here had of passing their tests if they weren't already great at the subject. I repeat, as long as you have studied the theory hard enough. Professor Umbridge looked up and met Harry's gaze. He still loathed this woman. Lucius Malfoy was the height of morality compared to her. There will be no need to try the spells before the test. The theory will suffice. Harry had bite his cheek, but he was able to keep his temper. Umbridge had made Harry's life a living hell once, and he fully intended to repay the favor. Regrettably, he would not be able to accomplish that here and now, but her time would come. Eventually, the class settled down, resigned to reading listlessly from the book. Draco came up to Harry after class as he was walking out with Ron and Hermione. Draco said 2 words before disappearing back into the crowd. I'm in. I know I keep asking this, but what was that? Ron asked. Harry grinned. Trouble. And this time he would be causing the trouble on purpose. If the professors thought he was mischief-making before, they would be in for a rude awakening. Chapter 6. Even the Slytherins. Come on, Hermione. It is a great idea, Harry implored. It was your brilliant idea, he thought. All right, but if we get in trouble. Hermione, Harry moaned. This is worth the trouble. Besides, I am not doing this for myself. I already know everything I can teach. The prospect of Harry knowing more than her hit a sore spot that Harry had been digging at in basically every class excluding history of magic. Harry thought it kind of funny that as a would-be 7th year, he was barely keeping even with Hermione. Yet he was a little sad that she was upset with him, or not so much upset as hurt. Being the best at nearly everything, especially compared to Ron and Harry, had become her identity. It was depressing because he knew she was so much more than that. We will have to find a way to communicate the time and date in secret. I did look up club rules at Hogwarts, and there is nothing against this, but if Umbridge gets a whiff of it, she will shut us down, Harry said. Ron had been pretty quiet for the week and had yet to speak through this conversation, arms crossed and moping. But he couldn't help but mutter then, I can't believe you invited Malfoy. Harry sighed and looked out the window. The sun was peeking out from the clouds. Ron, are you planning to try out for keeper now that would graduated? Harry asked, switching topics. Ron's cheeks immediately tinged pink and he looked extremely self-conscious as he asked, Maybe, do you think it is a good idea? I thought, with the new broom I just thought. Do you want to go practice? Harry asked. Ron perked up then. Yeah, that would be great. All ills between them were momentarily forgotten. Ron dashed up the steps to get their brooms. Harry turned to Hermione. We also need to ensure a way that there are no snitches. Hermione nodded. Where are we going to meet? He wondered if the Slytherins would sign it. To him, it didn't really matter. If the Slytherins weren't with them on this, it was going to fail anyway. I know a place in the castle, but I think we ought to meet in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom for the first meeting. Hermione nodded again. I'll get the word out. Harry, Ron has a point about the Slytherins. We can't trust them. Harry stood and gave her a weak smile. Hermione, what reason have we given them to be worthy of their trust? It goes both ways, You can't be respected if you never show respect. She arched a brow. Have you forgotten what they've said about me? About you? We aren't going to change their minds by making ourselves their enemies. I'm not saying we let them hurt us, but we can avoid giving them for an OWL study group. And if being the bigger person gets you expelled, then what? Then you and Ron can say I told you so when I am packing up my stuff. Doing the right thing for the greater good had gotten him killed and sent back in time. What was a little expulsion compared to that? Ron came stomping down the stairs at a run. Harry, I brought your firebolt. Let's go. With one last meaningful look to Hermione to confirm he was serious about this, Harry took his broom and followed Ron down to the Quidditch pitch. There was no more talk about the Dada Club as they pelted the quaffle at Ron. Harry remembered how bad Ron's practice had gone and did not hold back to give him a better chance at being comfortable. At first, Ron seemed disheartened as Harry scored goal after goal, but then Ron blocked a few, then a few more, and that seemed to boost his confidence even higher. They ended the night on a good note with Ron saving 3 goals in a row. As they walked back to the castle, the light of dusk seeping behind the mountains rapidly, Ron asked, "Do you think I have a chance at being keeper?" "I do, but dash." "But what?" Ron asked nervously. "But you have to keep your cool. Once you missed one, you got so upset you would miss another 3 right after it," Harry explained. "You have to get a thicker skin, even with mist sometimes." Ron's ears had turned bright red, but he nodded. "Yeah, all right. We can keep practicing until tryouts," Harry consoled. Ron gave him a small smile. They had been distant lately, but they could always count on Quidditch to bring them back together. They chatted about the subject, past games, what a Loon Wood was as a captain, and about their new captain who Harry tried not to give future information about. In the common room, Harry saw Ginny and got an idea. "Hey, Ginny," Harry called, dragging Ron to her. Ginny looked up from the book she had been reading with a bemused expression. She was seated by the fire, the firelight making her hair glow. "Hi, Harry, Ron. What's up?" "Ron is trying out for keeper this year, and since you want to be a chaser, I thought it might be fun to practice together," Harry said, grinning. Both Ron and Ginny gaped at him. "But how did Ginny stuttered. "How did you know I wanted to be a chaser?" Harry didn't realize his mistake until Ron said with a laugh, "Ginny doesn't play Quidditch. Harry, whatever gave you that crazy idea?" Harry saw Ginny's expression and took 2 quick steps back, holding up his hands. "I thought all the Weasleys but Percy played." "Well, Ginny doesn't," Ron chuckled. "Don't talk for me," Ginny snapped. "Well, you don't," he said. "Well, yes, I do," she said, standing and throwing her book on the seat behind her. She put her hands on her hips. "I've been going out at night to the shed for years, especially when all of you were at school." Fred and George had heard most of the conversation and had sidled up to them. "We should have known, Fred," George said. Fred nodded sagely. "Indeed, George. Oh, little sister Dash." "Was never Dash. The angel." "Why didn't you tell us?" Ron asked. "Because you never included me," Ginny shot back. "Why tell Harry?" he said, narrowing his eyes. "I didn't," she exclaimed. "So how did you Dash?" "No?" the twins asked. "I guessed." Harry covered awkwardly, fighting hard to make it sound like a statement and failing. "But you said she was trying out for Chaser Dash." Harry cut him off. "Chaser and Keeper are the only 2 options on the team currently. Sorry for starting a family feud or whatever, but I am going to bed." He turned to go up the steps. Ginny caught his hand. "Thanks, Harry, for including me." For a moment, Harry just stared into her warm eyes. He remembered being in love with her, remembered kissing her, and his heart as he realized that she remembered none of that. That hurt. Cho had been his first crush, but Ginny had been his first. And she didn't even remember. He wasn't her ex-boyfriend. He was her never-boyfriend. He pulled his hand gently from hers, his cheeks a bit flushed. "Anytime, Ginny." He turned and all but ran up the steps. He collapsed on his bed, the weight of all the secrets he was keeping crushing him down. "Oh. Ooh-hoo," moaning Myrtle crooned as her bathroom filled with students on a cloudy Sunday morning. Everyone from the first DA club was there along with the entire 4th and 5th year Slytherin students, with the addition of Astoria and the exclusion of Crabbe and Goyle. The Gryffindors seemed upset, but neither the Hufflepuffs nor the Ravenclaws seemed that bothered, though Harry caught a few of them rolling their eyes at the posturing around the room. Unbeknownst to Ron and Hermione, Harry had cast a muffliato on the door so no one outside could hear. He wasn't ignorant of the paintings they all passed to get here, but the paintings didn't work for Umbridge. "All right," Harry began. Everyone fell quiet. "I think we are all here. For the 5th and 7th years, you are here to pass your exams. For everyone else, I'll assume you are here to learn to defend yourselves. We are going to begin with simple spells for the first few club meetings, and then work our way up to more complicated spells. As everyone likely has a mixed level of skills, considering both our ages and our teachers over the years." Zachariah Smith was a poop again. Oddly, it was Draco who silenced him. "Oh, would you shut up? No one forced you to be here." Smith crossed his arms. "Who forced you to come?" "We were invited," Astoria chirped. As if Potter would invite the Slytherins to anything. "He hates you all," Smith said disdainfully. "I don't hate them," Harry said through gritted teeth. "And I did, in fact, invite them." "Against his better judgment," Ron said under his breath. Harry shoved him, nearly pushing him into the sink. Harry turned back to the crowd. "Everyone deserves to learn self-defense, even the Slytherins." "But why?" Smith asked. "Because I was almost sorted into Slytherin and I would hate to be treated the way people treat them," he said. The room was dead silent for all of 10 seconds before Cho's friend said, "You have a change of heart and we all have to go along with it. Is that what this is? Why are they really here?" Harry frowned. "I thought it was only Slytherins and Gryffindors that distrusted each other to extremes." Pansy laughed. "We get along better with the other houses, but we don't really fit in with the rest. Which, I suppose, would make sense for why you are secretly one of us, considering you're the most popular person in the school with only 2 friends." "He has more than 2 friends," Fred interjected. Smith spoke again. "So why be here then? We all thought you hated Potter." "We are here because it is important," Daphne Greengrass said, voice glacial. "Everyone knows he's the best at data. The Dark Lord, basilisks, dementors, dragons, merepeople, and whatever in the world he faced in the last task that caused him to walk around like he was half dead. I want to pass my exams, and I am not going to die because I didn't learn the basics in school." "She's right," Luna said. "Harry's wiser than he looks. He can teach us loads." Millicent raised her hand. "Millicent Bulstrode," Harry acknowledged while calling on her, noting that she had grown into her androgynous features since he last paid her any attention at some point in the 2nd year. "Millie," she corrected. "And where was the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry pointed toward the sink Ron was sitting next to. "The faucet with the snake on it. You just say open in Parseltongue and the whole thing turns into a slide that drops you into the pipes. I considered having the meeting down there, however, with the tunnel caved in there it's no longer safe. Besides, there are a ton of rat bones. And because I know everyone is curious, beyond the cave-in there is another door also opened by Parseltongue, then a bunch of statues of Salazar and a huge dead rotting snake. Really unpleasant smell," Harry concluded. They all stared at him. "You should have been in Slytherin," Pansy said, eyeing Harry appraisingly. He shrugged. "I killed the basilisk with Godric's sword." "Slytherin's monster comes out through the girls' bathroom?" Theodore Nott asked, a hint of disgust in his voice. "That's how I died." Moaning Myrtle gushed, swirling in the air above their heads. "Speaking of outrageous things you've done," Blaise Zabini began, "can you explain why you've ended up in the hospital wing every year?" Harry sighed. It was natural for them to be curious. Besides, it wasn't like he had to tell them about the Department of Mysteries or robbing Gringotts while impersonating a Death Eater. "I don't think I can remember every time, but starting in the 1st year, Hermione and I snuck a baby dragon off the astrology tower to Charlie Weasley, who works at a dragon reserve. Draco caught us and landed us all in detention. Hagrid took the 3 of us into the Forbidden Forest to discover what was killing unicorns to drink their blood." Several gasps. "Where Draco and I ran into Voldemort's shade drinking unicorn blood. Honestly, that would have been the ideal place to kill me, but Voldemort is incompetent when it comes to me. Almost as incompetent as Quirrell." "What does Quirrell have to do with any of this?" Daphne asked. Harry went on. "And, oh, I forgot about the troll. Ron took it out with a Wingardium Leviosa and club above its head, saving Hermione and I from becoming gelatin. But we were suspicious about the troll all year, and the door Dumbledore told us not to open. When we figured out it was the Philosophy Stone they were hiding, we decided the madman drinking unicorn blood would also want the stone. The professors didn't listen to us and Dumbledore was out, so the 3 of us decided to go for the stone ourselves." "That's incredibly stupid," someone said, and Harry merely nodded as he rattled on. "Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was either a trap designed to stall anyone getting in or a test that Dumbledore set up for the 3 of us." "Why would he do that?" Draco asked. "Albus Dumbledore thinks it's my destiny to defeat the Dark Lord." "You're a kid," George pointed out. Harry shrugged. Tell that to the stupid prophecy that got both my parents and Neville's targeted, because we had the unparalleled honor of being born in the last month of summer. Now, where was I? Oh yes, Ron nearly died. There was only enough potion to get me through walking through fire, to the last test where I met Professor Quirrell. Seriously? Theodore asked. He had Voldemort on the back of his head, and because I got the stone in my hand and Quirrell was a particularly dim person, he tried to wrestle it away from me instead, I don't know, stunning me or cursing me, which is when the three of us discovered that my mother's blood ward protects me from Voldemort, mostly. My skin burned his skin, and I held onto Quirrell's face until the professor died and Voldemort's shade escaped to find somewhere else to hide. Dead silence. Harry repressed a smile. So my first year ended with me in the hospital wing and no one caring I murdered a professor. Second year was more dramatic because the basilisk was potentially a bigger problem. Everyone called me insane for hearing voices in the walls, or as Hermione later learned, the pipes. Another shade possessed Ginny. Hagrid told Ron and I to ask the man-eater spiders in the Forbidden Forest to help, which they sort of did before deciding they wanted to eat us instead, and thanks to an animated car we survived, yeah. Ron shuddered. What about the bludger? Alicia asked. And what about the time you almost fell off your broom the first year? First year was Quirrell failing to murder a first year. Second year was Dobby, Malfoy's house elf, trying to convince me to leave Hogwarts and not get eaten by a basilisk, which, of course, became my sole focus. You all know who got prettified. Ginny got kidnapped. Ron and I abducted Lockhart to help us save Ginny at one point. We had him go down the sink slide first, which was only useful thing he did. Lockhart used Ron's wand to obliterate us and possibly leave us for dead, which is what he did to all the adventurers he self-inserted into his books, by the way. Wait, he was a serial killer? Tracy Davis asked. Hermione flushed when Harry looked to her. She shrugged. He didn't kill people, but he maybe, I guess, sort of lobotomized people like he did to himself with Ron's broken wand, but presumably not as badly because he would have gotten caught. Harry opened his hands in a gesture of take it or leave it. Anyway, met Junior Voldemort, Tom Marvolo Riddle Ghost, ambitious half-blood with delusions of grandeur who presumably killed more than just Myrtle before he turned 17. That shade I managed to kill. How many shades does he have? Ginny asked. Not as many anymore, Harry said with a smile. I got that one at least. Third year my godfather was hunting Ron's rat, who was actually an animagus form of Peter Pettigrew, the secret keeper for my parents, and the rat bastard who stole their wands the night Voldemort attacked us. We should have let Hermione's cat eat him, but instead I got freakishly good at using a Patronus charm, and Hermione and I illegally helped my godfather Sirius Black and one of Hagrid's hippogriffs escape false justice. Luna clapped. Harry bowed. Fourth year, he went on. Barty Crouch Jr., who was using Polyjuice and his general madness to masquerade as Professor Moody, put my name in the Goblet of Fire. Afterwards, I got a wee bit toasted by a horntail that broke its chains. Nearly drowned in the lake because I wouldn't put it past the school to accidentally drown the tributes. And then the fun final task where Barty crucioed Fleur Delacour by imperioing Victor Crumb to ensure I got to the cup first. I told Cedric the cup was a trap. He didn't believe me, so I proved it by springing the trap, and Pettigrew had me at one point with a demented baby shade of Voldemort. Luckily for me, Voldemort was in no shape to duel and Pettigrew isn't that scary of an opponent and he ran away. Thus the tale how my friends and I mostly survived the last 4 years. Silence. They all stared at him. Clearly they had questions, but it seemed to be sinking in that while they were all complaining about his fame and the drama that had surrounded him. He'd also been flirting with death since the moment he stepped foot back into the wizarding world. Hermione cleared her throat. So, unless anyone has any further protests about Harry's experience to teach practical defense against the dark arts, I'll need you to sign here if you would like to attend club meetings so we know how many people to prepare for. The meeting ended after that. Harry told them to meet him on the 7th floor and Hermione ensured everyone signed their names on the list. By some miracle, no one but Myrtle overheard them. Chapter 7 Nonverbal. Of course, a lot can happen between now and the exam. We've got plenty of time to improve, but the grades we're getting now are a sort of baseline, aren't they? Something we can build on, Hermione was saying. They sat down together at the Gryffindor table. Obviously, I'd have been thrilled if I'd got an O-. Hermione, said Ron sharply, if you want to know what grades we got, ask. I didn't mean well. If you want to tell me dash. I gotta pee, said Ron, ladling soup into his bowl. Happy. What did you get, Harry? Hermione asked. You don't want to know, Harry said, though he was just barely done it. He was still holding the essay in his hands. He didn't dare look up to the head table. He would not have been able to swallow his smugness. Oh, it can't be worse than Ron's, George said. Fred came around him and snatched Harry's essay out from under the table. He whistled. What is it? Ron asked. No way he got a T. Harry's been doing so much better in potions. Better, Fred chocked. George laughed. What does T stand for? Hermione asked. Troll, Ron said. Oh, come on, just show us, it can't be a T. Harry really has been doing well in potions, she said positively. Fred laughed then, tipping down the parchment so all could see, the small, spindly tiny O in red ink. I'd say Potter's doing a far shot higher than well, Fred said. I don't think I've seen anyone outside of a Slytherin or Ravenclaw get an O on anything in his class, George said. Hermione's face was pained when she said, Good job, Harry. Really, you did great. How? Ron asked. What did you think I was doing all weekend? Harry asked. I don't know, all the other homework we had? Ron suggested. I finished that with Hermione when you were out practicing Quidditch with Ginny. Who are you and what have you done with my Potter? He asked, only half joking. I think he died, Harry said in a joking tone, though he wasn't joking at all. Oh. Something was wrong with Severus's classes. Vastly wrong with his classes. It started with his fifth-year class. Potter's abnormally superior brewing skills had continued as they had in the last 2 weeks, proving to be more than just a fluke. But that wasn't the wrongness that infiltrated his class. His class had grown, quiet, dare he even think it, in a peaceful way. Tensions between the Slytherins and Gryffindors were at an all-time low. Experimentally, Severus decided to hold back on his critics unless someone, Longbottom, was about to put something explosive into their cauldrons. It had become, somehow, one of the most productful, easiest classes to teach. The same trend followed throughout the week in his 4th and 7th years classes as well. The first years to 3rd years as well as the 6th years were still abhorrent amongst the Gryffindors and Slytherins. The Hufflepuffs still cowered and the Ravenclaws were their usual selves, split between studious or twittering. His favorite student, Ms. Lovegood, remained the only fixed point, her skills as remarkably precise as ever. Severus wasn't the only one to notice the change. The other heads of house were beginning to whisper. It wasn't so much that the Gryffindors and the Slytherins were getting along as they seemed to have called a truce. The younger years seemed to be taking their lead. The problem all the professors seemed to share was that it felt less like a resolution and more like the calm before the storm. Oh. Phileas called Harry to stay after class on Thursday. How have you been, Harry? He asked. Harry sat on the table next to Phileas's podium. I've been fine, though I feel like I keep making little slips all over the place. Like what? Well, I used wandless magic on the train and I let on that I know Ginny is a chaser, which none of her brothers, not even Ron, knew, Harry said, kicking his legs in the air. So you still haven't told your friends, Phileas stated. Harry shrugged. Even if I told them, what would it really change? They wouldn't spontaneously be the Ron and Hermione from my future. Oh hey Ron, you should know that you deserted us when we went camping, and oh Hermione, you were tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange. Also, we robbed Gringotts and rode on a blind dragon together. It was awesome. Then we went back to Hogwarts where we barely survived slaughter. Phileas listened, letting Harry voice the poison festering in his veins. The boy may be 18 in reality, but he was still so young for the trauma he had witnessed and endured. I don't know what I am doing, Harry said finally. Did you know the first time? Phileas asked. Harry laughed and smiling, he admitted. No, in fact, I think I was even angier last time. I treated my friends like crap. His smile faded. Guess things haven't changed all that much. Phileas thought he was being too hard on himself. Regrettably, what he knew of Harry told him it wouldn't do much good to say so. Speaking of change, you wouldn't happen to be involved in the new peace, shall we say, between Gryffindor and Slytherin houses, would you? Harry grinned. I may have started a club. Phileas repressed a smile. What kind of club? A dada club where we use magic. I did it the last time too. Except without the Slytherins. I figured this time I would be more inclusive. Good, Phileas said. Whatever faults the Slytherins may have, keeping secrets is typically one of their talents if you treat them fairly. Ron and Hermione say we shouldn't trust their sense of honor. Phileas shrugged. If you never give them a chance, then you will never know. That's what I told them. Besides, it fell apart last time anyway because they figured us out. Harry, may I make a suggestion? Sure. I still think you should open up a bit more to Ms. Granger and Mr. Weasley, however, you should not limit yourself to just 2 friends. You may find that there are others in this school who are as welcoming of your company, and perhaps more mature that may help you feel more connected to this timeline, Phileas advised. Harry thought about opening up to Draco and scrunched his nose. Phileas laughed. I am not suggesting you go around at random and share your circumstances, but there are those you can spend time with who might not make you feel so alienated. It seems to me you're having difficulties keeping back things that they already should know. You may find you have more control over your own words with someone you were not previously close with. Harry nodded. I'll try. The Dada Club should help. Although my arithmancy class has been kind of fun. Luna, Susan, and Astoria are pretty fun to be around. A study group outside of class might not go amiss, Phileas suggested. Yeah, and I see them at the Dada Club too, so yeah, that sounds good idea, Harry said. It is still the class I have the least practice with. Phileas was pleased to have been helpful and relieved to hear on many fronts the child wasn't isolating himself. Harry, what would you have wanted to be had you graduated Hogwarts? Phileas asked, switching topics. I wanted to be an Auror. That was surprising. Not because he was unqualified, no, Phileas had the suspicion that Mr. Potter was more skilled than most Aurors, but that he wanted to work for the government after they had failed him so. Do you still want to be an Auror? Harry frowned. I don't know. I haven't thought much about the future, to be honest, not outside Hogwarts. Choosing to die sort of felt like the end-all-be-all choice. Phileas's heart clenched. What else do you enjoy doing? Harry thought for a moment. Teaching. I really like teaching, but I suppose getting a job at Hogwarts is sort of a limited opportunity. Not if you're applying to the Dada position, Phileas remarked, half joking. Harry smiled, understanding the joke. Yeah, but that is only for a year unless I manage to kill Voldy completely. So it really is cursed? Phileas asked. Yeah, Tom Riddle came back to Hogwarts and offered to teach it, but Dumbledore turned him down and demanded he leave the school grounds. This was before he started openly attacking Britain. I think his eyes were already red then, though. Sort of a tip-off. How did you see that? Phileas asked, surprised by the visual description. Dumbledore showed me in his pensive. Phileas sighed, rubbing his nose. Lunch period is almost over, Professor, Harry commented, looking at his watch. Phileas held up a finger and hopped off his stack of books. He pulled out one towards the bottom. He handed the book to Harry. 6th and 7th years can apply for a teaching assistant position. Start going over this book and make lesson plan outlines. Next year, if you like, you can be my assistant. Mostly, I will use you for in-class examples and you will help me grade homework. But if you want a career as a teacher, it will help. You might have to do a few years as a private tutor, but if becoming a professor is what you want, there is no reason you can't accomplish that. Thank you, Harry said, smiling. Keep me updated on your club, Phileas said, smiling back. I will, bye Professor, have a good day. You too, Harry. The boy flashed him an even wider grin at the use of his first name. When he was gone, Phileas sighed and his thoughts swirled in worry for the boy who lived. Oh. Minerva was watching Harry closely. She could have sworn he did the last transfiguration spell wordlessly, however. She was not sure as she had been on the other side of the room. Harry was officially ahead of the rest of the class with or without the factor of wordless magic. He was no prodigy so much as it seemed like he had learned these spells before. His essays were much improved as well, showing not just a reiteration of the text or class notes but actively engaging with the theory. Harry's essays were blessedly shorter compared to that of Ms. Granger's small scripted lengthy papers. An unforeseen effect of Harry doing well in class and on homework was he was engaging more with the other students. Students would ask him for assistance before asking herself or Ms. Granger. Minerva had never seen Harry so open with others, and the other students seemed to be advancing further by taking his lead. "Mr. Potter," Minerva called. "Yes, Professor," he said, looking at her questioningly. "Come to the front of the class, please." Harry got up with a lack of nervousness that made her realize how much change he had gone through over the last year. She placed a rat on her desk. "Vanish it." Harry frowned at her. "Silently," she said. The class was riveted. Harry opened his mouth to ask, but she cut him off. "Say the word in your mind and visualize what you want done." His focus went to the rat, his eyes narrowing. He raised his wand. "And Mr. Potter," she interrupted. "Yes, Professor?" he asked. "If you fail on purpose, I will know." Harry bit his lip. Then, with a single flick of his wand, the rat was gone. The students were open-mouthed. Hermione's eyes were so wide one could see the white all the way around her irises. 50 points to Gryffindor, Minerva said coolly. The Ravenclaws looked at each other, doubtful that any of them were ready to try that. "Now, I don't want anyone to be discouraged. Nonverbal spell work is a measure of focus and mental discipline. Determination, though, is not enough. Your mind must also be settled. Typically, it is in the 6th year when we encourage or demand that students practice nonverbal spells," Minerva said. "If you feel that you have mastered a spell or wish to challenge yourselves, you may try it. As Mr. Potter so politely showed us, it is possible even for younger students." Oh. Harry kept his expression mild even as guilt and anxiety built inside him. He was afraid to meet Hermione's gaze, afraid to see the harm he had caused her. It really wasn't fair that he jumped ahead. A small part of him hissed, but didn't she do the same with the time-turner in their 3rd year? He shook the thought away because it wasn't the same, and he wasn't half a year ahead, he was 2 years ahead, almost 3. One of the Ravenclaws raised his hand, addressing his question to Professor McGonagall. How was Potter able to do that on just one try? Harry watched her, worried what she might say. He wasn't expecting earnest praise of his past abilities. "As I have heard, Mr. Potter was able to throw off the Imperius curse on his first attempt. Mr. Potter has demonstrated an incredible sense of self and mental fortitude which has a tangible effect on his mastery over his own magic. However, while he may be an outstanding example, it does not mean any of you are incapable of reaching similar heights." She met his gaze, giving him a small smile. Harry felt his cheeks warm, trying to hold onto the praise of his character even as both Hermione and Ron refrained from talking to him for the rest of class. It was Neville who leaned over to ask, "How did you do that?" Harry shrugged. "Practice." Neville frowned. "Why have you been practicing nonverbal spells?" Harry thought of the months on the run, hiding, cowering. "I thought it might come in handy." It had saved his life more than once. Oh. Harry stayed after class to talk with Professor McGonagall. Neither Hermione nor Ron offered to wait for him. "I wish you hadn't asked me to do that," Harry said when the last student had left. Minerva straightened her papers before giving him a shrewd, "You could have held back, Merlin knows you have before." "That's not true, I have always tried," Harry said indignantly. "Potter, the only magic you have ever put your full focus into before this summer were those spells you felt it necessary to survive with. Defending your life or others has been your only magical interest, aside from flying, since arriving at this school. That's not fair. It certainly isn't, not to yourself nor to your professors. I will be expecting far more from here on out, and as your head of house, I will insist that your other professors do the same," McGonagall said. Harry's skin drained of color thinking of what Snape would do with that instruction. He hadn't even started occlumency classes with him yet. She must have seen his expression, for hers softened. "Harry, I know it may sound daunting now, but in the long run, it will only be for your benefit. You could be great, you know?" Harry laughed bitterly. "That phrase does like to keep following me around. I think a part of me wanted to prove it wrong." "What keeps coming up?" she asked. "That is exactly what the Sorting Hat said when it wanted to sort me into Slytherin. McGonagall's eyes widened ever so slightly. Do you regret your sorting into my house? Harry laughed again. No, of course I don't. Snape would have had me expelled in the first month. She smiled slightly. Well, all the same, I am proud to have you in my house, and Snape would have been lucky. Or retired. She laughed. Professor, I was wondering if I could request a favor? Harry asked. She raised a brow. Are you going back to headquarters at any point soon? She nodded. Likely this weekend. Why? Harry pulled a small bundle of letters out of his bag. I was wondering if you could give these to Padfoot. I am afraid to send Hedwig. She took the letters. Wise, the ministry has its eye on us. Umbridge shouldn't be around people, much less children or owls, Harry said, just barely swallowing his anger when he thought of what had happened to her last time. McGonagall's lips thinned. Yes, well, there was no one else available. Canceling the class would have been better. It is a core subject, Mr. Potter. Maybe Dumbledore should hire Bill Weasley to have a look at the school. He is a curse breaker after all, Harry said. Minerva tilted her head, like a cat trying to get a better look at a shiny object. Not a bad thought, Mr. Potter, but it is fast approaching dinner and I have noticed you skipping one too many meals of late. Though I am pleased you have been feeding your mind, your body is just as important. Thank you, Professor, Harry said, though he had little to no intention of eating much, certain he wouldn't be able to keep the food down tonight. Oh. So this whole nonverbal thing wasn't supposed to extend to my two best friends, Harry commented at dinner. Says the guy keeping secrets, Ron retorted. He has no idea, Harry thought. Aloud he said, we don't always have to be attached at the hip. I am not helping you with your homework anymore, Hermione said. All right, Harry said. At least you're talking to me again. You made it look so easy, she muttered. It isn't, Harry exclaimed. It took me forever to figure out how to do it. By forever you mean a year ahead of everyone else, she seethed. Harry threw his hands up. What do you want from me, Hermione? I thought you wanted me to do well. I thought you wanted me to try harder at schoolwork. I did, she said. But only if you can stay being the best, is that it? She paled, backtracking fast. No, Harry, wait I dash. The thing is, Hermione, even if I end being good at things or seemingly better, that doesn't mean you aren't smart, it doesn't mean you aren't the brightest witch of our age. Someone else's success or failure doesn't define you, Harry said, standing. He felt his stomach twist. He really hadn't been eating much lately. Where are you going? Hermione asked as Harry seemingly walked in the direction of the Slytherins. I am going to go sit with Luna. At least she doesn't look at me like I'm a freak, he shot back. Because she is one, Ron said flippantly. Harry froze, his whole world seeming to slow down to that moment. How long had he tolerated that? How long had he been okay with his friends being mean to others? Hadn't that been why he refused to be friends with Draco and allow himself to be sorted into Slytherin? Ron's remarks about Hermione in their first year had made Harry uncomfortable, but he had already thrown his lot in with Ron, who had been his first human friend. But that had been waved away when Ron had stopped the troll. The question was, no, that being their friend was so difficult now that he was older, was Harry still okay with it? Was he still okay with the way people, his friends, treated Luna, just as everyone had treated Harry throughout his life? Oh. The way Harry went completely still informed Ron he had well and truly stuck his foot in his mouth again. He swallowed hard when he saw the anger in Harry's eyes when he looked back to meet his gaze. No one at the other tables had noticed, but Hermione was avoiding his gaze while Fred and George watched. Harry took one step back to say in a voice low enough that most wouldn't overhear, "She isn't a freak. She is a kinder and more intelligent person than you have ever been or could hope to be." In an almost Snape-like move, Harry spun around and didn't look back as he went to Ravenclaw's table. George gave a low whistle and Fred remarked, "You know, Ron, when your best mate has a crush on a nice girl, maybe don't call her names." "Harry doesn't have a crush on her," Ginny chimed in. George laughed. "Gin, you've been looking at that boy like he hung the moon in the sky since you met him. If you haven't noticed that he looks at her as if she was the moon, then maybe you've never really seen him. He's not wrong, Angelina said. Ron bit his lip, again, cursing himself for not keeping up with Harry over the summer. He met Hermione's gaze and knew she felt just as lost. At least, by her pinched expression, Ron could tell that she seemed to agree with him that Luna Lovegood was a weird choice of friend, much less to have a crush on. Oh. Harry was welcomed warmly at the Ravenclaw table. "Hi, Harry," Cho greeted, ignoring the stunned Gryffindors behind him. "You can sit with us whenever you like, Potter," Terry Boot said. "We don't mind excellence." Luna placed a buttered roll on the plate that had appeared before Harry. "Thanks," he said, taking a bite of the much-needed sustenance. Luna patted the top of his head. Harry felt his shoulders ease at the wordless acceptance. The anger he felt towards his friends was easy to set aside as he watched quietly as Terry got into an argument with a seventh year about the origin of Welsh green dragons. It was strange, but he felt included in the debate, though he never said a word. Neither did Luna, but they both laughed when the seventh year described the difference between a common Welsh green and Welsh red by making Fong gestures with his hands, then emphasizing a big frill with flaying hands and whooshing sounds. Luna's laugh was loud and bold, and he wished he could be more like her. McGonagall said he had a great sense of self and mental fortitude, but he wished he was as comfortable in his own skin, in being himself, as Luna Lovegood seemed to be. Chapter 8: Dumbledore's Pet. Something has changed at Hogwarts, somewhere between the cold stones and shifting stairs. Yet nothing is truly different. It's as if the world has drawn her breath and held it. This summer was strange. I felt like I'd been trapped in our old house, standing in the doorway with those little purple flowers in my hands which I had carefully chosen and gathered for my mum. I felt like I had, watching her stand there at her cauldron, golden-haired and magnificent, thoroughly unaware of what was to come as she was about to pour the white powder into her potion. It seemed as though I had been living in this moment forever, in that moment where all terrible things are inevitable. When I'm about to be blown back and she's about to be blown away, the purple flowers lost in the smoke. And yet, somehow, the inevitable at Hogwarts has been rewritten. Nothing has changed but the possibility of change. All signs point to Harry, whether he is the cause or the product, I do not know. When I look at him, the light around him bends as if he doesn't belong here or doesn't quite fit. But I know that he does, even if the rest hasn't caught up yet. When he looks at me, the flowers are still in their fields and there is no smoke to be lost in. I hope Harry will be my friend. I thought Ginny was my friend, but time changes us, and I think she is just pretending now. Now, she smiles to be nice because we are neighbors. But that too is changing. She doesn't smile at me anymore. To be fair, Harry is pretending too. He's breathed in his own smoke and he's pretending it doesn't hurt. Luna Lovegood's Derry, 21st of September, 1995. Oh. Tonight would be their first real club meeting. Previous club meetings had been held, twice, in Myrtle's bathroom because this hall had been being cleaned by Flitch. And those meetings had been more of a group study session where everyone complied with what they needed help with the most on the tests. Eventually, the seventh years, led by the Slytherins, had taken to quizzing Harry about defensive spells. He hadn't gotten a single question wrong. "He finally cracked," Draco said as they all watched Harry pace before a bare wall on the 7th floor. "Shut up, Malfoy," Ron said even as he was thinking the same. On Harry's third rotation of pacing and muttering, "I need a room for us to practice in." The wall rippled and a pair of wooden doors appeared in an elegantly carved archway. "The room of the requirement," Hermione breathed. "I read about this in a Hogwarts, a history." Harry pushed those double doors open, revealing a large hall. "Everyone in," he ordered. "Didn't Dumbledore use this as a bathroom once?" George asked. "We used it as a broom closet once," Fred remarked. "How did you find this place?" Hermione asked in awe. "Dobby," Harry said as he scanned the faces entering the room, doing a mental count. "My ex-house elf?" Draco asked. Harry nodded. The doors shut behind the last to enter and Harry clapped twice to get everyone's attention. "All right, so like I've been saying, we will be starting with the basics before getting into more complicated spells." Hermione raised her hand. Harry caught a sigh. Things had been tense between them, but they seemed okay for the moment. Yes, Hermione? I think we need a name, she said. Anything but Dumbledore's Army, he thought. I think we should be called Dumbledore's Army, DA for short, she finished. A few murmured agreements from the group, a few of the Gryffindors cheered, and the entire Slytherin fraction remained absolutely silent. Maybe we should go with something the majority of us like, Harry suggested. The majority of us do like it, aside from the Slytherins, Justin Finch-Fletchley sneered. Harry allowed himself the sigh this time, of course, they couldn't let be easy. How about owl studies? Harry posed. That way if someone says the whole of it, people will either think we are studying for our OWLs, which the majority of us are, or we can say we are literally studying owls. Hedwig can be our mascot, Susan threw in with a smile. She's such a pretty bird. But that isn't cool, Ron said. Dumbledore's Army is cool. Hermione was saying as we were coming in that it is what Fudge is most afraid of. Then it would be stupid to name our group something that calls attention to us, Blaise Zabini said. Besides, not everyone likes Albus Dumbledore, Astoria said, crossing her arms. Harry likes Dumbledore, Ron shot back. He looked towards Harry and was dismayed by Harry's pinched expression. Don't you, Harry? He coughed. Well, I like Hedwig more than the headmaster. He really didn't want to think about his opinion of the headmaster. It had been something he had avoided rather well since serving his death at his instruction. But you do like him, right? Ron asked. If it's a choice between Hedwig and the headmaster, I'm choosing my bird, Harry said. Several people sniggered. At least she's my friend. Hedwig didn't want him to die. Harry, Hermione chided. The headmaster is our friend. Just because I'm his pet golden boy doesn't make him my friend, and it certainly doesn't mean that I have to like him, he snapped. Some of the group exchanged looks. Blaise cursed and handed Daphne Greengrass a galleon, presumably, for losing a bet. Bird Club it is then, Theodore not interjected. Can you all quit wasting my time now? Harry had never liked a Slytherin classmate more. With an air of relief, he began the lesson. He drew his wand. The disarming spell is one of the simplest and most useful spells in defense against the dark arts. Without their wand, an opposing witch or wizard has dash. Finch-Fletchley had opened his mouth and Harry pointed his wand at him. If you don't like what I'm teaching, then get yourself gone. I am not forcing anyone to be here. There was a brief silence. No one, not even Finch-Fletchley, made for the exit. Right then, as I was saying, a witch or wizard has limited options. This spell also works on opponents with weapons, such as knives, swords, axes, shovels, quills. Basically, anything someone is holding is fair game. Here are the motions and the pronunciation. He showed them, disarming a dummy that appeared on the far side of the room. Try focusing on your aim. For those who feel really comfortable with it, can try practicing the spell silently. Harry had no idea what the 7th-year Slytherins were capable of. He was just glad that none of them was on the Slytherin Quidditch team. As in the past, the first 10 minutes were a chaotic example of all the reasons why becoming a professor wasn't an often sought-after position in the wizarding world. This time, they did have an even number of people when excluding Harry, so that Neville was paired with Hannah Abbott. Harry was very glad that he had wrote a note to Flitwick over the summer about Neville needing a new wand because the pair was evenly matched now. Maybe Neville was even a bit stronger. Harry didn't stop the group. He walked through the pairs, making suggestions as he went. The Slytherins were about even with the rest of the class, though the purebloods had an obvious leg up with their Latin and body formation. Their aim, however, Harry used a shield charm to stop an overcharged spell from knocking Cho Chang upside the head. Judge how much power you need to take a wand out of someone's hand, Harry said, raising his voice for all to hear rather than pointing out the individual, who in this case had been Astoria Greengrass. The more power you push into this spell, the better your aim needs to be, as a lower charged disarming spell isn't forced to go in a straight line. 2 hours later, everyone had gotten the spell, the 7th years all having managed to accomplish it silently, including the twins. That was good, Harry said, calling their meeting to close. Wait. One of the 7th-year Slytherin boys called. I want to see you perform the spell against someone. What's your name? Harry asked. Maximilian Ulysses, he said. Harry waved him forward. Well, you just volunteered, so step forward. Someone give us a countdown. Luna stepped out of the bystanders and counted 3, 2. She seemed to get distracted by something floating over their heads before getting to the last number. Hermione made a harsh, impatient sound in the back of her throat before calling out, 3, 2, 1, go! Maximilian's wand was flying in the air before the 7th year could twitch his wrist. Harry caught the wand and tossed it back to him. Maximilian grinned. You can call me Max Potter. Harry smiled back. Well, that's the disarming charm. Let me know what days everyone has Quidditch practice, and if times don't line up, we can do 2 half classes early in the mornings before breakfast. People left smiling and chatting. Wait, so is this the OS, Owl Studies, or BC, Bird Club? Someone asked as they moved out of the room in groups of 4s. Harry was surreptitiously checking the map as they left. It was a Saturday, and they were all well within curfew, and Umbridge hadn't begun making her ridiculous mandates yet. I think it should be OSC, Owl Studies Club, another person said as they left. Harry? A soft voice said from behind him. He turned to see Cho looking at her feet. Did you need something? He asked. No, I just wanted to say you're a great teacher, she stuttered. Thanks, Harry said, laughing internally. He would be doing cartwheels if he had still been 15. Now, it was just amusing not to be the flustered one. Well, Her voice cracked and her face turned bright pink. See you around, she finished in a squeak. Harry was smiling as he tried not to chuckle at his first crush's antics. It was funnier now that Cedric wasn't dead, just graduated. Hermione approached him. Eyes narrowed. I thought you liked her? I did, Harry said, eyes checking the room to see who was lingering. Susan, Astoria, Luna, Ron, and Hermione were the only ones left. But not anymore? Hermione questioned. Not anymore, Harry agreed, stepping around her to talk with his other classmates. You got over her quick, she said as he passed. I didn't really know her. It wasn't that hard to get over her, Harry said, just out of earshot of the others. Ron and Hermione left together after that. Hi, Harry greeted. You are a good teacher, Astoria said almost grudgingly. Susan smiled. It was a lot of fun. BBCE, Luna said. What? Harry asked, tilting his head a bit. Luna smiled brilliantly at him. Best bird club ever. He laughed. Inevitably, everyone ended up calling Bird Club, and occasionally, they called Harry the Birdmaster, while Luna shortened it to Best Bird. Who was Harry to argue? Hedwig was, after all, the best bird. Oh. Harry smiled warmly at Snape, who was clearly biting back a snarl. Harry had been assigned the temperamental potion that typically took at least 2 people to accomplish on his own. Ron and Hermione had joined Neville, Hermione ensuring that their cauldron didn't blow up, Neville ensuring that they would barely scrape a passing grade for the day, much to Hermione's annoyance. Harry's potion, however, was flawless. Bring up your flasks and clean up, Snape hissed. Potter, stay behind. The class, seeing the man's obvious frustration, hurried to get done and out of the room. Tell me, Potter, Snape began, teeth clenched. How does someone as abysmal as you at potions advance so quickly? I read some extra books and paid attention while I brewed. Which you admit to choosing not to do in years past, Snape sneered. Harry shrugged. I gave up truly trying in this class when you punished me on the first day for taking notes, which you would have known had you bothered to look past your nose. You must have practiced brewing outside of class, Snape said, bypassing the criticism. He had, but Harry wasn't about to admit to being 3 years older to Snape. It's like baking. Snape raised a brow. And how long have you been baking? I have been cooking and baking since I 4. Snape's eyes narrowed. For is too young to reach the stove. Aunt Petunia was ever so kind enough to lend me a stool, Harry said sweetly. Somehow I doubt you were a genius adolescent. Did your aunt and uncle eat the food you made? Harry fought back a flinch. That first year had been difficult. And painful. I wasn't exactly making meals at 4. I mostly boiled water and stirred. By 6, he was making meals on his own while his aunt baked. I wouldn't have trusted you in a kitchen, Snape remarked. Harry only just managed to not roll his eyes before saying innocently, I learned quick to carry heavy pots with both hands. Snape frowned, his demeanor shifting. Were you ever hurt? This time Harry did roll his eyes. It's a kitchen. I was tiny, what do you think? Snape shook his head. I still can't image you were any good at making food that young. It was either get good or dodge frying pans. Snape stared him down. Harry looked away first, breaking eye contact, fearing this game. I believe it is time we start you occlumency lessons. I'll see you Friday night, Snape intoned. What am I supposed to tell people? It's not like I need remedial potions, Harry said with a smirk. He remembered being humiliated last time. He was all too happy to make this harder for Snape and Dumbledore this time around. You will tell them you have detention for talking back to your professor, Snape said, glaring at Harry as if he were his father returned from the dead to haunt him. Harry's false cheer ended the moment the potions room's door shut behind him. He needed to learn to protect his mind before Snape got a shot at him again. The man might be trying to keep him alive, but he was too deep in Dumbledore's pocket. Harry didn't hate the headmaster, but Harry wasn't going to be strangled by his own leash this time. Oh. Harry should have been in arithmancy right now, yet at the moment he was sitting in Albus Dumbledore's office wondering if a person could read minds through stone floors. Harry, my boy, Dumbledore said jovially. Lemon drop. No, thanks, Harry said, glancing up briefly. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled, and Harry looked to Fawkes to avoid eye contact. Fawkes sang a few notes at him in greeting. Harry couldn't help smiling a bit in response. Harry, do you know why you're here? No, he answered honestly. Minerva asked at the last staff meeting if every teacher would challenge you a bit more in your classes. She seems to feel you are more advanced than the rest of your classmates. Harry frowned. I am not doing much better than Hermione. Minerva thinks you have barely begun to scratch your potential. Harry didn't know what to say to that. Dumbledore waited and finally said, I disagree with her. Harry frowned and hated himself for feeling hurt that Dumbledore didn't think better of him. Why does it still matter to me what this man thought? Harry didn't have an answer for that either. I don't think you should be given extra work. As it is, you seem to be distancing yourself from Ms. Granger and Mr. Weasley. Dumbledore continued. We haven't Harry started. They haven't liked me doing better in class. Ron hates that I have been studying so much. Perhaps you are studying too much, Harry? Dumbledore chided gently. You deserve to have a childhood. Rage, hot, blinding rage filled his gut, his veins. Heat rushed up his face and Harry closed his eyes as the fury tingled along his scalp. Childhood? What childhood? His tongue felt heavy. The injustice of this man, telling him he deserved a childhood after what Harry had suffered, after watching Sirius die, after Dumbledore allowing himself to be killed, after making Harry walk to his death, to speak of a childhood? He didn't know if he wanted to cry or throttle the old coot. It took time before Harry found enough to say quietly, You want me to hold back? You don't want me to fight. You want me willing to be your willing sacrifice. No, I want you to spend time with your friends. Our friends are our greatest gift in this life, Dumbledore said. Well, maybe I want better friends, Harry said venomously. He wasn't that mad at Ron and Hermione. Well, maybe he was mad at the way both of them had been treating Luna, but Harry understood that his changes had been unnerving for them. His time traveling wasn't their fault, and he had planned to be patient with them. They were his friends, and he would wait for them to grow up some before pouring the truth down their throats. But of course, Dumbledore didn't know that. Dumbledore frowned. Ms. Granger and Mr. Weasley have been extremely loyal to you through your years at Hogwarts. Harry crossed his arms. He was 18, but it was easy enough to lean into his outward appearance as a 15-year-old body. If Dumbledore wanted to treat him like a normal student, then immature teenage coming right up. He sunk a little in his seat. I don't want to talk about this, he sulked. My boy, who else are you going to talk with? Harry felt a stab in his heart. He had been so isolated growing up at Hogwarts without Hermione and Ron. He had literally no one. He had Sirius, briefly, but Harry had been so worried about him that he had never really depended on his godfather. This time, though, he wasn't so very alone. His new friendships were tenuous, but he already knew his club would fly to the Ministry of Magic for him. He did have a real relationship with Sirius now, one Dumbledore had no part in. Harry had Professor Flitwick, who had never bought into all of Dumbledore's tricks, being one of the only powerful professors at the school who wasn't a part of the Order of the Phoenix. "I have Sirius," Harry said. The hunching in of his shoulders was not as pretend as he wanted it to be. "Talking with Sirius Dash. You know, instead of lecturing me about my study habits, you could be trying to get my godfather free," Harry muttered. "My boy, it isn't that easy, Dash. It never is." "Harry," Dumbledore sighed, "in my long years, I have often found the world appears very small, either from living only in our own perspective or because the patterns of history so often repeat themselves. The world is so very connected that the answers we find seem obvious. It becomes hard once we have found an answer to remember the journey in which that answer was unknown to us. You may feel that you have in some way outgrown your friends, but I would urge you not to cut them out of your life. True friendship is hard to come by, and no matter how different you may feel from those around you, right now, know that they are as human as you. They have struggled to find their own answers." Answers? What answers? Harry thought, closing his eyes. He had no answer. He had died. Died for his friends and the people at this school. Died because he had trusted and loved Albus Dumbledore like some domesticated pet. But Harry had no answers at all. He didn't know if his death had succeeded in laying waste to Voldemort, if anyone had killed Nagini, if his death had led to anything except the victory of the Dark Lord. Harry didn't know if there even was a future. By going back in time, had he erased the future he had come from? What had he died for? Why had he time traveled? Was this reality real at all? "Harry, what happened in the graveyard?" Dumbledore asked kindly, like a cherished grandfather. "Wormtail got away," Harry said hollowly. "So did Voldemort. You were gone for a long time." He has no idea, Harry thought. He looked out the window. So much had happened in the next 3 years, so much could happen. "It took a while," Harry answered, eyes focused on the gray clouds. Darker clouds were building. It was likely to rain soon. "A while for what?" Albus coaxed. "To gather my bearings." Albus nodded and motioned to the door. "You may go to your next class. I shall not keep you any longer, but I want you to know I will always be here for you, Harry." Harry's throat dried up, his mind spinning. Liar, liar, liar. As Harry stood, he realized something. Realized why he didn't just tell Dumbledore the truth, the future as it had stood. Because if he told the headmaster, then he would have to confront the old wizard on how he could groom him for death. Because deep down Harry knew Dumbledore had loved him, and Harry knew that asking that question would hurt Dumbledore. And if Dumbledore didn't love him as Harry had loved the headmaster, then what was it all for? Why had he trusted him? Why had allowed himself to be betrayed? Used? His whole life masterminded by 2 of the world's most powerful and heartless wizards. So like a well-trained dog, Harry kept quiet and didn't bite the hand that owned him. Chapter 9 Always. My stripy socks are gone. I put them to the left of the matches, and I remember folding them into a bow. Perhaps Raxburts are responsible. Maybe that is why I have a false memory of bowed stripy socks. Father says they are invisible creatures that distract the mind. Best Bird Club was fun. Harry seems to have taught before. His friends don't see him. Hedwig came to the second meeting on Woden's night. Hedwig sees everything. Harry says that everyone calling the club different things all the time is a good thing. The Muggleborns like calling the club Owl Studies, OS officially, though the Slytherins still call it BC, and when Harry talks about it in arithmancy he calls it BB for Best Bird. He also asked if our group could have a study night for arithmancy. I am happy to be included, happier still to spend time with my friend. This is the best month of Hogwarts ever. 24th of September 1995. Luna Lovegood's diary. Oh. Harry was pretty much panicked about his occlumency class. He had been clearing his mind before sleep each night, and though he could sort of imagine he had mental shields, he was not prepared for Snape to attack his mind. As he trekked down to the dungeons, he cursed himself for not going to Flitwick for help. Old habits die hard. Apparently, not even the killing curse could kick the habit of not asking for help. Harry took a deep breath before knocking on Snape's door. Harry's only strategy was to throw memories of his childhood at Snape. If the bat wanted to have his memories, he could have the Dursleys. The rest Snape would have to fight for. It was a flawed plan, but it was a plan, at least. Snape answered the door, standing back to let him in. Harry flinched at the sight of the pensive. Not long ago, he would have jumped at the chance to look into Snape's mind. But the memory of the man sobbing and holding his mother's dead body still made his gut clench. It was an odd feeling, sharing one of his greatest sorrows with one of his least liked people. It hadn't seemed so bad when the man was dead, but Snape was easier to appreciate when he wasn't forced into his company. Snape said the same spiel he had the last time before pointed his wand at Harry. His heart kicked into high gear and Harry couldn't stop himself raising his own wand in defense. As easily as he had disarmed Maximilian, Snape's wand shot across the room. He wasn't ready for this. "This is not a dueling class, Potter," Snape growled, but his onyx eyes were wide with surprise. Oh. Snape had not expected the boy to be so fast. He had been hearing the stories that he could do nonverbal casting, but that was not the same thing as witnessing it for himself. The boy's breathing was abnormally heavy. Snape retrieved his wand. "Again, Potter. The Dark Lord can perform this spell without a wand." Oh. Harry had barely regained control of his breathing. He braced for impact and he was suddenly back in the Forbidden Forest. Red eyes, green light. White mist. Albus was standing across from him in a misty king's cross. "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean that it is not real?" Pain. More white mist. Harry was very small, sitting on a familiar couch in the Potter house at Godric's Hollow. His parents were with him, smiling sadly. "Live, son, please live," James said, touching a gentle hand to Harry's cheek. "We love you. We will always love you," Lily said, silver tears trailing down her pale face. "Live for us, be happy. We will always love you, always." Pain. Harry was back in Snape's office, only he was on the floor now and he was crying. "Potter!" Snape started reaching out to him. Harry crab-walked backwards until he hit the wall of cabinets. He curled in on himself. Dying, death, life, living, pain, what was the difference? He was going to throw up if he didn't get a hold of himself soon. Those were memories that he had not even known he had. Is that what had happened to him when he died the first time? Had he died when he was a baby too? He had forgotten how much it had hurt when he came back to life. The phantom pain in his scar made him want to claw at his face. "Potter?" Snape was at his side, kneeling on the floor and holding out a goblet. "Drink this." Harry glared at the bastard. "I wasn't meant to remember that. I didn't want to remember that." Too close, what would have happened if he had tipped the other way? Would he be home with his parents now? Would it have been better for everyone if he had died back then? He was going to be sick. "Drink this," Snape persisted. Harry snatched the cup and downed it before shoving it back at Snape. He half hoped it was poison. Death cured all ills, didn't it? Harry was suddenly angry that he had lost control over himself in front of this man. Harry wiped viciously at the tear tracks under his eyes with the sleeve of his robe. He had to adjust his glasses as he had nearly knocked them of his own face. The potion had begun to show its effects. Harry let his head fall back with a dull thump on the shelf behind him, his shoulders slumping. Calming potion, which was a blessing and curse because, on the one hand, he wasn't throwing up, on the other hand, he could clearly think about the concept of dying. Twice. He had died twice, literally died twice. He hadn't wanted to know that. He wasn't dealing well with the first, rather the second, death. It was impossible to think that he had said goodbye to his parents. His parents who had told him to live. Oh. Severus had no idea what to think about what he had just seen. The Dark Lord's red eyes, followed by green light. That's what had happened to the boy that night. Albus talking to him at King's Cross was odd. James Potter and Lily, beautiful, beautiful Lily, talking to their small orphan child was not. It was tragic. Guilt was drowning Severus. Hating James's son had been so easy. They looked so alike. Hating him was easy, simple. While facing the fact that it was Severus's fault that Lily was dead had tormented him for years. But looking at her son, pale and sweaty on his office floor, Severus couldn't hide from the fact that this too was his fault. His fault a child had been struck by the Dark Lord's killing curse. His fault that Harry Potter, Lily Evans' only son, was an orphan. He met the tempest in those emerald green eyes and would have given anything and everything to go back in time and take their place. Severus should have been the one to die for his own mistakes, not this family. He had hated James, but nothing that man had ever done had earned him his fate. Severus sat on the ground with James Potter's son, waited for Harry to regain himself after having to relive the experience of being murdered. "I will always love you." Severus felt like the evil git that Harry had come to view him as. Eventually, Harry stood, his wand fisted in his right hand. "May I go, sir?" Severus did not stand. His voice was low but absent of malice. "Yes, we can try again next week." Harry took quick, jerky steps to the door but froze before opening it. He didn't turn to face Severus when he asked, "Are you going to tell Dumbledore? Are you going to tell him what you saw?" "No," Severus said truthfully. "I swear to you, I will not tell Albus what I saw or heard, or felt." Harry turned then. "Guess I don't have a choice but to believe you. After all, the word of a triple agent is something I can take to the bank. Isn't it?" Potter left, slamming the door behind him before Severus could dredge up a retort. He remained on the floor, legs stretched out in front of him. He regretted everything, every decision he had ever made. Yet his regret meant nothing, absolutely nothing, for no matter what he did or felt, she would remain dead. Hearing her voice in Harry's memory had destroyed him. "I will always love you." Those words were not meant for him, had never been meant for him. A fresh wash of self-loathing came with the thought, with the wish that he would have preferred the mother to survive the killing curse rather than the son. Severus really was an evil bastard. Oh. Harry hid for the rest of the weekend. He skipped Quidditch practice and buried himself in books. He was careful to make sure he ate breakfast and dinner though, for everyone's eyes were on him, the students, the headmaster, Snape, McGonagall, and Flitwick. Harry had no idea what Flitwick thought. Sunday morning, Hedwig came to him with a letter, or rather a note from Flitwick that read simply, "Ask for help." Harry gently refolded the note and pocketed it. Never looking up at the head table, he took Hedwig with him, set on finding a quiet place to read. Hedwig nestling on his shoulder. Oh. Draco and Theo exchanged glances as Harry left the hall. As one they got up and went to the Gryffindor table. "Granger, what's wrong with Potter?" Draco asked when they got there. "Get stuffed," Ron said around a mouthful of food. Draco gave him a disgusted look. "I have no desire to look like you, Weasley. Granger, answer my question." Hermione shrugged. "How am I supposed to know? I'm not Harry." Theo slammed a fist on the table. "He's your friend, little mouse, and far as we are aware, nothing in the last week should have caused him to be hiding." "Harry isn't hiding," Ron said. Draco scoffed. "Yesterday, I saw him run away from a Hufflepuff. A Hufflepuff. Her name is Susan Bones, and her aunt is Head Dash." Hermione started. "Why is the boy who lived running away from anyone? He looks like someone has died," Draco stressed. "He skipped Quidditch practice," Ginny said. "And when is the last time Potter missed a practice?" he asked. Fred answered. "When he's unconscious from some sort of attack. Or when Harry's in Madame Pomfrey's care." George said. "Imprisonment," Fred coughed. "And none of you lions know why Harry's upset now?" Theo asked incredulously. "If you little snaky poos are so worried about him," George cooed. "Why don't you go talk to him?" Fred suggested with a snigger. "Maybe we will," Draco declared. A few of the Gryffindors chuckled. "You think this is funny?" Theo asked. "We think you're funny," Fred said, grinning. "So much for Gryffindor friendship being golden," Draco snapped. Hermione shook her head. It's funny because if Harry doesn't want to talk, then he will not talk. The more you try to force him, George began. The more closed mouth he gets, Fred said. There are a lot of reasons why Hermione and Ron are Harry's only friends, Neville said, poking at his food. One of them is because he doesn't let anyone else in. You know, he really would have been a good fit in our house, Theo commented. Ron snorted. And what do you think you can do to make Harry talk that we haven't already tried? Draco met the challenge in his second cousin's gaze. I will do more than try. Oh. As it happened, Harry's hiding spots were good enough that the next time anyone saw him was in Snape's potions class Monday morning. Harry had arrived early to class and had set up his cauldron in the closest station to Snape's desk. Draco put his supplies next to him. Mind if I partner with you today? Harry nodded, not pulling his gaze up from the potions book he was rereading. Potter, what's wrong with you? Harry didn't say a word. Draco continued badgering him, but nothing he did got even the slightest rise. The first hint he got for the reason Harry was moody happened when Snape entered the class and avoided his own desk, to avoid Harry unless absolutely necessary. In ignoring Harry, he subsequently ignored Draco too. This is weird, Draco said as watched his godfather loom over people on the opposite side of the room. Harry chuckled. Not used to be ignored? Draco whipped his head around to face the raven-haired boy. You talk. Harry grinned. Will the miracles never cease? Are you all right? Draco asked. Fine, Harry said, focusing back on the potion. No, you're not. If you were going to answer your own question, why did you ask me? You've been hiding. Why? None of your business, Harry said evenly. Everyone's worried about you. Sweet of them. What happened? Was it something to do with Snape? You had detention with him, right? Draco pressed. Harry frowned at the blonde. I'm alive, I'm fine. Why do you even care? Because Slytherins take care of their own. Unless you're a Death Eater, Harry sniped. Draco hissed, watch your mouth. Harry's mouth twitched. Don't challenge me to a hissing contest, Draco. We both know who would win that one. Or do you want to test it out and summon more serpents? You have no idea what happened to our families after the war, Draco whispered. I know mine ended up dead. Well, everyone I might have liked in my family anyway, Harry muttered. What is wrong with you? Draco asked, exasperated. Do you want the long list or just the highlights? Harry asked. I am trying to be nice, Potter. Then maybe you should, I don't know, use my name. It's Harry in case you're wondering. Draco shook his head. I don't understand you at all. Shadows darkened Harry's eyes. Honestly, I don't think I do either. Draco and Harry's potion was the best in the class. Snape even gave 5 points to Gryffindor after the 15 he gave to Slytherin. Oh. Harry was quiet in arithmancy, but the beaten dog look he'd been wearing all weekend was gone. He even apologized for avoiding Susan. Luna gave his hand a reassuring squeeze as they were packing up at the end of class. Oh. Harry didn't know what to think anymore. Learning that he had died when he was a baby was strange. Remembering his father and mother in the afterlife was, he didn't have words for what that was. Harry's only memory of his parents was their screaming as they were murdered, other people's memories, Voldemort's ghost wand, and the resurrection stone. But the memory of his mother telling him she would always love him and his father telling him to live was both healing and soul-destroying. 2 questions had been haunting him. 1, if he had died he would be with them, so was living really better? 2, if his father had wanted him to live, why did the resurrection stone version of him encourage him to die? The first, he should probably talk with Flitwick and/or with Sirius. The second? Harry was thinking he needed to get his hands on a copy of Beetle the Bard and maybe write a letter to Luna's father. Mr. Lovegood had known about the Hallows when he talked to him what was for him just a few months ago. Oh. Umbridge was actually lecturing in their afternoon class that Monday, and what she had to say had Harry holding a hand over his mouth. Draco had sat next to him this class too, trying and failing to get Harry to talk about what was wrong. Draco gave Harry an odd look as Harry made a near-farting noise into his palm in an attempt not to laugh. Centaurs are barbaric, unintelligent dash. Harry lost it, laughing full out, as he remembered her threatening them in the Forbidden Forest, and them dragging her away. The entire class was staring at him. "And what is so funny, Mr. Potter?" Umbridge asked coldly. "I dare you to repeat that to a centaur. I am sure they'll love it, and that you'll walk away on top," Harry grinned, the glorious image of her wailing crossing his mind's eye. She glared at him. "Centaurs are dumb animals dash." "They aren't animals," Harry said over her racism. "They aren't even technically magical creatures. They just wanted to be left alone and out of wizarding politics, so they waived their inclusion as magical beings." The class, all of whom, aside from Crabbe and Goyle, were in his dead-ass students, were gazing at him in fascinated horror. "Detention," Umbridge said. "For what?" Harry snarked. "For talking without raising your hand and spreading lies." Harry crossed his arms and leaned back in his chair. "If you want to make a field trip to the forest, we can prove who the liar in the room is. Me, who thinks you should treat centaurs like foreign world leaders, especially when on their territory, or you, who thinks insulting them is going to play out well." 15 points from Gryffindor, Umbridge snapped, "and a full week of detention." "I can't on Friday, prior plans and all," Harry said with a lazy grin. He was enjoying yanking her chain. It was a good distraction from the hell playing out in his mind. He could practically see the steam rising from her pink hat. "Quidditch is not an acceptable dash." "It's not Quidditch." "Then you will be in my office every day this week, including Friday." Harry sighed loudly, and then said in a slow, patronizing tone, "I am busy on Friday. Have prior commitments." "What are you doing?" Draco asked under his breath. Umbridge gritted her teeth, her pumps clicking on the stone floor as she stomped towards him. "What prior commitments?" "None of your business," Harry teased. "You cannot skip detention," she shrilled, voice rising. Harry smiled. "I don't intend to." "So you will be in my office Friday dash." "No," Harry said slowly. "I just told you I can't on Friday." He glanced at his watch. "Skipping detention can get you expelled," she told him. "Yes, but I already have detention with Professor Snape Friday night," and he called dibs. Umbridge blinked at him in surprise, mouth parted. Whatever she was going to say clearly lost. The bell rang and Harry was one of the first out of the room. Draco and Daphne were hot on his heels. "What was that?" Daphne snarled. "Entertainment," Harry said. "You should be thanking me. That was a full 10-minute detour of a rubbish lecture." "But your detentions?" Draco threw in. Harry shrugged. "I already finished my homework for the week." "What about OS?" Daphne pressed. "We have the weekend or the mornings," Harry said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go explain myself to my head of house before the toad gets to her." Oh. Chapter 10. I aim to misbehave. Today, I drew a butterfly falling from the sky. Yellow to blue. I owed it to my father. I told him that Harry Potter might be my friend. 27th of September, 1995. Oh. Harry had no idea how he was going to get out of this. It was Tuesday and he was sitting in his makeup detention during his break, which Umbridge happened to have a break in too. Serendipity do-da-day. A part of him thought that maybe she wouldn't bring out the blood quill as there were still classes in session, but was not at all surprised when she laid the black feather on his desk, her ugly rings gleaming dully. The pink in this room was annoying, and though he liked cats, the kittens around him seemed somehow demonic. I must not tell lies. Harry stared down at the parchment in front of him. He saw the back of his hand. It was unblemished. He wasn't going to scar himself again. Not for the cursed toad and not for his damned pride. But how to get out of this? He looked up at Umbridge, her eyes wide with eager anticipation. Bloodthirsty hag. What would Sirius do? Harry asked himself. His eyes slid to the door and he grinned. Oh. A loud yelling and the pounding footsteps sounded in the hall. A few bangs from a wand were followed by the screeching for someone to stop. Students poked their heads out of their classes as they watched the famous Harry Potter running full tilt down the halls, a black feathered quill raised above his head like a torch, Umbridge lagging behind him. Her stride was comparatively tiny to Harry's, and the clicking patter and scrape of her heels made an uneven rhythm. Clearly, she was not used to running. Her wand was fisted in her hand as she tried desperately to keep up. Students began to cheer Harry on as he ran and kept shouting, "A-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H," a Viking's call to charge. Not that the purebloods understood the reference to the druidic ancestors. Harry barged into the transfiguration room. He climbed one of the tables and hopped down from tabletop to tabletop. Umbridge's stunner knocked over a box of mice, initiating a round of screams. Shields were going up around the room, easily fending off the Toad's wild stunners. Fred and George were howling with laughter as Umbridge shrieked, dancing on her toes. Harry had no shame in dropping to duck under McGonagall's desk to hide behind her skirts. The Transfiguration Professor had her wand raised, the mice turning to bouncy balls which Umbridge stepped on, causing her feet to go out from under her. She landed on her back with a resounding thwop thud. Her little humph was barely audible in the chattering and laughter of the room. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall demanded, turning on him, her wand held at her side. "What is the meaning of this? This is a Newt's level class." "He was in detention with me," Umbridge gasped as she got to her knees. Harry laid the quill on McGonagall's desk. "She wanted me to write lines with this." "He lies," Umbridge exclaimed. "He's a liar." Harry rolled his eyes as his head of house recognized the feather. Harry really needed to embrace Sirius-like behavior more often. It had been exhilarating. "Oh." Minvra's lips were set as she was about to mention that lines were hardly the worst punishment during a detention, until she realized what the quill was. Her eyes widened in horror. She wanted to disbelieve it, but Dolores worked for the government. Minerva pulled Harry behind her with her free hand. She had her wand pointed at the shorter witch who had finally gotten to her feet with the other. "You dare," Minerva seethed. "You dare use a blood quill on one of my students? I will have you." "They are not illegal, and the boy needed to be taught a lesson. Blood quills have been outlawed at Hogwarts for hundreds of years," Minerva exclaimed. The class had descended into complete silence. She doubted any of them had ever had cause to see their professor so enraged. "The ministry dash. I do not give a damn about the ministry. I am assistant headmistress at this school and I forbid this. I shall take on any detention you give out and I shall bring this to the headmaster." Dolores attempted to sneer up at her. "Cornelius will hear of this." "Tell him," Minerva invited. "Go ahead. While you at it, don't neglect to tell him how you were about to torture a student for speaking out of turn. If I find out that you have attempted this on any other student, I will be writing a personal letter to every parent and guardian who has a child at this school, and we shall see what they have to say." The pink abomination glared. "Get out of my classroom," Minerva commanded. "Oh." Umbridge opened her mouth, but McGonagall yelled at her, "Get out!" Umbridge left and the room cheered, even the Slytherins. McGonagall turned to Harry, who could not suppress his urge to hug her. A quick one, but a real one. "Thank you," he said just loud enough for her to hear. "You are still in detention, Mr. Potter," she said firmly, not reproaching him for the hug. "Take a seat. You will be joining this class. It is a double period and the homework will be the completion of your detention." Harry all but skipped to a seat between the twins. They both slapped him on the back warmly. Harry didn't think he could manage being a trickster all of the time, but there were worse fates. They were transforming inanimate objects into animated ones, non-verbally. Harry was pleased with this challenge, his block of wood turning into a snake with bark-patterned scales by the end of the period. It was a real snake. It moved in all snake-like ways, but Harry wasn't sure how to make it real. It was moving, but the eyes were lifeless black pits. Maximilian, who sat a row behind them, had succeeded in creating life. His snake was sassing the class about how filthy humans smelled and how hungry she was. Harry summoned a tiny mouse from the box that McGonagall had fixed back to its original position. Harry turned and placed the mouse on Max's desk, and he hissed in Parseltongue, Here, food. Can you stop complaining now, please? It is distracting. The sassy snake blinked once at him. Speaker? She asked, then promptly ignored him in favor of devouring the mouse before it could flee. Max gaped at him. What? Harry asked. She wouldn't shut about how hungry she was. She, the Slytherin boy next to Max asked. He wasn't in the BBC. Everyone already knows I'm a parselmouth, Harry reminded the Slytherin before turning back to his own snake-shaped lump of wriggling wood. Fred and George were grinning at him. What? The bell rang and they began to clean up their things. Nothing, George started. Just you, Fred continued. George, out slithering dash. The Slytherins, Fred finished. Oh. Harry went to Flitwick's office after class. What's been going on? Flitwick asked without preamble. Harry plopped himself in a chair opposite from his professor. Umbridge tried to use a blood quill on me and McGonagall saved me. Flitwick crossed his arms. I heard. Now tell me what has been happening with you. I haven't talked with you since your meeting with Albus. How did that go? Harry sighed. He said I deserve to have a childhood and shouldn't be pushing myself in classes. Flitwick was silent for a long moment before he asked, How did you like Minerva's new class? I didn't master the spell, but it was challenging and I liked sharing a class with Fred and George. They are helpful and light-hearted. Ron and Hermione are more competitive or disinterested or bickering. That was fine when I was younger, but now it seems overly childish and, well, hard. I don't know, just hard to be a part of, Flitwick finished for him. Harry sighed, able to verbalize more clearly what Flitwick had warned him about only a few weeks ago. It isn't that I don't like them or being around them, but yes, I feel like I don't fit in anymore. And yet you are getting along with the older students, Flitwick stated. Harry pursed his lips. Is age really such a big deal? Long blonde hair flashed through his mind's eye. It can be, especially with the sort of experiences you have had. That your two best friends have no memory of what you remember experiencing with them is another layer. So how do I fit in again? Harry asked. Are you asking how you can be your 15-year-old self again? Flitwick rephrased. Harry, you can never go back to who you were before, well, not without a memory charm, and there are simply too many ways that could go wrong. Besides, there are marks left on the soul that would haunt you even if you no longer remembered their cause. But I have gone back to being 15, haven't I? I mean, look at me. Harry stretched his arms out. I'm short. Flitwick smiled. Height is not everything. Harry's cheeks reddened. Sorry. None taken, Harry. I just meant this isn't my body. Flitwick frowned. It is indeed your body, and you need to start taking better care of it. I've been eating, Harry said, affronted. You've been skipping lunch for almost a full week, and while stature isn't a paramount concern, you are short for your age in a way that isn't genetic. Did the Dursleys feed you properly when you were growing up? Harry didn't say a word. It was Flitwick's turn to sigh. Harry, why is it that in your narrative of your life, you leave out your family? They aren't, Harry said at once. At least they aren't people who really care about what happens to me. Flitwick looked into Harry's eyes for a long moment. Worse comes to worse, Harry, you shall be spending the summer with me. Albus will find himself in trouble if he tries going against me. Albus always has a say in what happens to me, Harry said, making sure to let his unhappiness about that fact be understood. What would you say about entering Minerva's Newt classes permanently? The professor asked, veering the conversation again. Harry's eyes widened. I am pretty far behind, aren't I? We are only entering the 4th week. You are an able student. I see no reason you couldn't catch up and keep up. Of course, you will be expected to take your OWLs. But you don't have to take any Newts until your 7th year if you don't want to take them this school year or the next. But Harry stammered, his thoughts tangling. What about my other classes? And just Newts in Transfiguration? That isn't even my strongest class, and what would I do in the next 2 years? In Transfiguration, Minerva made noises about you being interested in learning to become an animagus. That is a full year of study on its own, and for your last year, well, you have options. As for your other classes, Severus will continue you as you are, as he said, It will not hurt you to learn some of those potions by heart. Pomona also thinks that repetition is not a bad thing for her subject. Wait, you talked about this with them already? Did you? You didn't tell them that I dash. Time traveled? No. But the ease that you have shown in your classes speaks for itself. Of course, this was an informal meeting without the headmaster or Dolores, he added casually. Harry sunk into his seat. I am not a genius. No, but you deserve a challenge. I know you have been studying on your own, but being in an advanced class in the long run will be easier than doing busy work and then practicing without someone to help you, Flitwick said. Repetition seemed to be the takeaway for most of your professors. Minerva seemed to think that 3 courses most advisable for you to advance in are Transfiguration, Charms, and Defense. For obvious reasons, Defense isn't an option, however. The time in which you have Transfiguration with the 5th years is the time I have my 6th year Ravenclaw class. You could start your newts next year in Charms, and for your 7th year, as we have discussed, you could be my teaching assistant. Harry's heart pounded. It sounded too good to be true. He had never loved classwork before, but lately, schoolwork was the only thing keeping him sane. Learning was fun, was interesting, was so much better than wallowing about things that he had no power over. Yet, Hermione dash. Ms. Granger is a brilliant student, inquisitive and highly capable, however. Though she appears to learn quickly, that is due to a great deal of hard work. You are advancing with minimal effort. You have been studying books that are beyond your grade. So does Hermione, Harry argued. Ms. Granger is not reading advanced theory, nor is she reading spell books that have little to no explanation. Don't think that us teachers don't keep track of the titles of the books our students are carrying around. Harry, you have been reading things well beyond what most at Hogwarts or adults of any age pick up. Ms. Granger is reading textbooks, you are reading theoretical studies and field journals. Your essays also show an interaction and deeper understanding than Ms. Granger's reiteration of lessons. You are correct, you are not a genius. In time, Ms. Granger may advance and excel in many different branches of magic most will never have cause to be introduced to. But you, Harry, are a creative person with an immense amount of power and an innate connection to magic that is, in a word, incredible. Having the benefit of age, you are in time of your life to expand your horizons and the conviction. You didn't think Severus gave you an outstanding on an essay willingly, did you? Harry shook his head and said stubbornly, I am not a genius, I am just older. Harry, Flitwick said kindly, you are and have always been gifted magically. Ms. Granger is an extremely intelligent girl because she handles learning by asking why and how is a thing possible. The problem with that is that she avoids uncertainties. Yes, there may always be a why and how in magic, but much remains undiscovered. But what you have been asking this year is what is possible, and pushing yourself to see how far you can go. You have let neither failures nor the unknown stop you. Spellwork clicks with you. You have an excellent handle on theory when you put your mind to it, and more than that, you also understand how to get from action back to theory. Lily was very good with that, and no one ever doubted James's raw talent. It appears you received the best from both of them. Harry looked away, unable to control his expression at the mention of his parents. Flitwick continued, You are not the first student to pass through Hogwarts with the offer to do advanced studies, nor will you be the last. We would have offered it to both Sirius and James had they been more serious students, or even Lily had she been less social. Luna Lovegood's mother, Pandora Lovegood, was advanced in potions and charms. Andromeda Tonks graduated with 7 newts in her 6th year. Other students, such as Tom Riddle or even Albus Dumbledore, declined their ability to advance for social reasons. Harry, in light of what you have been through, I think this change, these opportunities, will make you happier in the long run. Harry squeezed his hands in his lap. He wasn't happy right now. He was bored and annoyed and stressed and sad, and he did want change. He was sick of living in the past. Well, he liked having everyone alive and for once being ahead of Voldemort, but he was sick of pretending to be 15. Alright, yeah, so newts for Transfiguration and with the 6th years for your class. Though I think it should be the other way around. Flitwick smiled. Minerva wants you to rise to the occasion. Although, personally, I believe she hopes that you will help to keep the twins in line. Harry snorted. No one keeps the twins in line. You should know that I told Minerva about your talking to me. She knows I know about Sirius. Nothing about the time travel, just about some of the changes in your personal and academic life. She believes that I am your confidant. You are my confidant, Harry said. Apparently, not one you trust enough to talk about what happened this weekend with. Flitwick shrewdly. Harry winced. I had my first declumency class with Snape Friday night. Flitwick went very still. What did he see? My deaths, and what happened in the in-between. Flitwick tilted his head to the side. How do you mean? Harry sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Voldemort hitting me with the killing curse. So Severus knows you are from the future. Nope, Harry said. At first that's what we saw. And then there was this white mist and Dumbledore said something about what's in your head being real, but then I was in Godric's Hollow, in the old house, and I was a baby. I was sitting in a misty white living room and my parents were… Harry couldn't finish it, which was stupid, but he couldn't seem to get the words out. Oh. Phileas's mind whirled. The first time? You remembered the first time you were struck by the killing curse. That was a horrifying revelation. I remembered the first time I died. Harry managed to choke out, voice cracking. Oh, Harry dash. I don't want to talk about it, Harry interrupted. Please just don't make me talk about it anymore. Of course, Phileas immediately conceded. Is there anything you need? Sirius, Harry blurted. I really just want to see Sirius. He would know, I don't know. Harry shook his head, hiding his face in his hands. He's your godfather and he loves you as you love him, Phileas said softly, his heart breaking all over again for this child. And he loves you and he knows your parents. I will talk to Minerva and see if there is anything that can be arranged. No one else gets to see their parents in the school year, Harry pointed. I don't want to be special. Harry, Phileas sighed, wondering how anyone, Severus, had ever described him as spoiled. No other student was purposely pitted against a Dark Lord with a terrorist following since your birth and made to fight him as 11-year-old and nearly every preceding year afterwards. I don't think being permitted to see your guardian over a weekend for emotional trauma would be considered coddling. Harry's mouth quirked. Yeah, suppose you're right. It is just last time I didn't really get to know him. I loved him, and he was there in a way that nobody else had been. But then he was gone and it was my fault. It was not your fault. Harry set his expression, not arguing but not agreeing. Phileas shook his head. Perhaps this is a conversation you must have with him then. I feel as though Sirius's death is more real to you than Sirius himself. If you make your memory and the real person confront, now that you have had time to settle some, you may be better able to handle this reality. The child blinked at him. Did anybody ever tell you that you're pretty wise?